In August 1995, 7 million people bought a piece of software that was advertised as the future of humanity. Microsoft spent $300 million making Windows 95 look bright, safe and family-friendly. They hired Hollywood stars, ran global TV specials and used Rolling Stone songs to convince us that a digital revolution had begun. What they didn't advertise, though, was what happened in the depths of night. When users started encountering bizarre glitches, hidden dungeons and strange network transmissions, an entire era of digital urban legends was born. Let's examine the untold horrors of Windows 95 together. Stay with me now. The nightmare started almost immediately. Mere months after release, threads began exploding across the early internet, claiming that Microsoft had hidden an undocumented program inside the core installation files. The rumor was specific. Every time that your computer connected to a dial-up modem, Windows 95 was silently copying your hard drive, transferring your private documents back to Microsoft. In the year of our Lord 2026, we have learned to expect corporate tracking. But in 1995, it triggered pure mass paranoia. The rumour grew so aggressively that multiple foreign defence agencies reportedly banned Windows 95 from military hardware. They were terrified that it contained a built-in backdoor for foreign espionage. Microsoft, of course, issued furious press releases denying the claims, explaining that it was just an automated registration tool meant to check hardware drivers. But the seed was already planted. Millions of first-time computer owners were left with a lingering paranoid question. What is this machine doing when I'm not typing? People were already paranoid when actively using the software, but somehow leaving the computer idle was even worse. Whenever a monitor went untouched, Windows 95 launched its built-in screensavers, and none of them generated more urban legends than 3D Maze. It was a first-person perspective that endlessly navigated a claustrophobic labyrinth of red brick walls. There was no player character or controls, no music, just silent procedural movements. Naturally, school playgrounds in the late 90s turned it into folklore. One widespread myth claimed that if you let the screensaver run for exactly 2 hours without touching the mouse, the camera would finally turn a corner into a secret room containing a graphic, disturbing image left behind by a rogue developer. Another theory insisted the maze wasn't random at all. Rather, it was a visual map of your computer's RAM, and hitting a dead end meant a sector of your memory was permanently corrupted. None of it was true, of course, but because the software offered zero explanation, the silence of the maze allowed human anxiety to fill in the blanks. Windows 95 shipped on physical CD-ROMs packed with extra system files. And to show off the computer's multimedia capabilities, Microsoft included pre-installed video and sound files on every disk. Because most households didn't have internet access yet, these were often the only moving human images or audio files on your entire hard drive. And watching them felt deeply uncanny. You had heavily compressed pixelated videos like Weezer's Buddy Holly played in a tiny flickering box, surrounded by a cold grey border. Even weirder were the audio system files hidden in Windows directory. Tracks such as Canyon.mid and Passport.mid were eerie synthetic MIDI compositions meant to test sound cards. Hearing these hollow robotic instruments echo through a quiet house at night gave users quite a bizarre feeling. Tucked even deeper inside the installation disk was a hidden software demonstration called Hover. Without any shortcut created on your desktop, you had to manually dig into the CD directories to launch it. And when you did, you were dropped into a floating hovercraft inside a completely empty, dark medieval castle. It was devoid of NPCs, dialogue or story. It was just a low polygon stone wall, floating blue spheres and an ominous looping synth track. For millions of kids in the 90s who stumbled across this file by accident while exploring their C drive, it felt like finding a rogue program that wasn't supposed to be there. It fed into the growing belief that Windows 95 was an endless digital maze, and if you clicked on the wrong folder, you would find something you weren't meant to see. But now we get to the strange part. The rumours weren't entirely crazy because Microsoft was hiding dark secrets inside their software. If you owned Microsoft Office 95, you possessed an official piece of code that looked like something pulled straight out of a creepypasta. It was an Easter egg hidden inside Excel. If you opened a blank spreadsheet, navigated down to row 95 and typed a specific obscure sequence of commands, the spreadsheet would instantly vanish, and in its place, the screen was swallowed by a 3D fantasy dungeon. It had blood-red walls, and it was officially titled The Hall of Tortured Souls. If you navigated down a narrow, pitch-black, winding hallway and typed a secret code against a blank wall, you reached a hidden room displaying low-resolution, dimly lit photos of the software programmers floating. To a modern gamer, it's a fun developer joke, but to an everyday accountant or a child in 1995 who accidentally triggered it by mistake, it looked like a virus, a curse, or a piece of dark software hiding inside the program. Modern operating systems don't have these mysteries anymore. Everything is documented, patched, and analysed by millions of people online within minutes of release. Windows 95 existed in a brief, uncanny window of human history. And dare I say, we lost the magic. It was a time when stepping into a computer meant stepping into an unexplored digital frontier. An era when a simple glitch or silent screensaver made an entire generation wonder what was really hiding inside the machine. So, apparently the internet died back in 2016, and for the last decade, you and I have just been sitting here playing with its digital corpse. Yeah. The conspiracy theorists call it the dead internet theory. They claim that the vibrant, chaotically human World Wide Web we grew up with was quietly taken out back and put out of its misery. And now it's replaced by some highly profitable, completely automated simulation. Now, normally when you hear these internet theories, it's just some lad in his mother's basement who has spent far too much time inhaling his own fumes. But here's the problem. I've had a look at the data, and it turns out that these crazy people might actually be right this time. Stay with me now. Okay lads, let's talk about a company called Imperva. They count web traffic for a living, which is a thrilling career choice, I'm sure. But in their recent global reports, they found that over 51% of all of the internet's traffic is completely automated. Literally more than half of everything moving through the digital ether is bots. That means the next time you open a browser, there's better than even odds that you aren't actually interacting with a human being at all. You're just talking to a statistical pattern that spent about 3 milliseconds analysing your search history and is now performing your preferences back to you. Look at Twitter, or X as we call it now, because that billionaire had a massive midlife crisis and bought a social media platform instead of a car. Independent analysis found that 64% of active accounts on there are potentially bots. And as Meatloaf says, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. You're scrolling through a comment section, getting your blood pressure up, arguing with Dave from Ohio about politics. But Dave is actually a server rack in the Far East that consumes 3 cents worth of electricity a day just to make you angry. And the mad part? The platform knows. They don't care, and why would they? A bot click just looks exactly the same as a human click to an advertiser. Money doesn't have a soul, lads, and they don't care if the hand touching the screen is made of flesh or code. But it gets entirely ridiculous when you look at YouTube. Around 2023, the algorithms realized that machines could generate content way faster and cheaper than humans can. Enter the era of AI slop. Take a channel like Super Cat League. They have 4 million subscribers, but every single video is a series of AI generated cats doing the physically impossible in a neon coloured world. Nobody wrote these videos. No animator sat down and poured their heart and soul into them. A machine just threw digital spaghetti at the wall until the algorithm liked it. And the wall has 2.5 billion users, and the spaghetti is infinite and almost free. Look at the true crime niche. Some absolute weapon set up an automated channel that generated 150 completely fake murder stories. And then they presented them as real historical events. One of these fake stories in particular, a brutal murder in Colorado that actually never happened, got 2 million views. It got so big that people started calling the local newspaper, the Denver Post, asking, why the hell are you not covering this? Can you imagine the poor journalist sitting at his desk in Denver, having to explain patiently, I assume, that the crime was entirely fictional? They were literally writing corrections to a murder that never really took place. And that's journalism today, everyone. So, what are the big tech companies doing about this absolute bin fire? Well, YouTube recently had a massive, very serious public relations moment where they announced they had deleted 16 massive slot channels that had accumulated a combined total of 4.7 billion views. They put out a statement where they were very concerned and very protective of their user experience. Except, simultaneously, they rolled out a whole suite of new AI creation tools inside the platform. Tools to auto-dub videos into 27 or so languages. Tools to generate backgrounds out of nothing. Tools to create shorts in mere seconds. They aren't trying to stop the bots, lads. They're just removing the independent competition so that they can sell you the corporate blueprint. And that's not really a crackdown, is it? It's more a protection racket with maybe better branding. Meanwhile, Meta is launching official AI profiles on Instagram. They're not real people, just simulated influencers with perfect skin and zero organs designed to sell you protein powder. But here's the part where it gets aggressively dumb. The real problem isn't that the bots have taken over necessarily. The real problem is that you have stopped caring. Think about your daily routine right now. You upload a photo and someone comments, "Great pic, mate." It might be a person, it might be a script running out of a warehouse in Bangladesh. But you reply anyway. You tap your little heart reaction and the system registers your engagement. The numbers go up and everyone's happy. It doesn't actually matter to you whether there was a human soul on the other end of that connection, does it? So long as that little red notification bubble appears on your screen and you get your little rush of dopamine. This should genuinely disturb you at a fundamental level, but instead you just swipe up, keep scrolling. Actual human creators, the musicians, writers, researchers, are all being absolutely crushed under the weight of this digital sludge. A human musician spends about 6 months writing a beautiful, heartbreaking song and uploads it. It then has to compete with 100,000 AI-generated lo-fi tracks uploaded by the same account on the exact same day. The human mind has to be brilliant just to get noticed. The machine just needs to exist. And the machine doesn't have to lose sleep over it. The machine doesn't have a rent crisis or a breakdown. It just hums along in the dark, generating ad revenue for people who view creativity as nothing more than data. Which brings me to the punchline of this big joke. You're watching this video right now, you've listened to me ramble on for, I'm assuming, nearly 10 minutes, but you don't actually know, do you? You don't know, not really, if I'm a real person who sat down at a desk, researched these statistics, recorded this audio, and
posted my bollock
editing it. Or if an automated system scraped thousands of hours of commentary, generated this exact script based on what makes humans click, and laid a synthetic voice over it. You don't know if you're listening to a person or a ghost of the machine, but you'll keep watching anyway. We all will. Because the alternative is logging off, going outside into the damp and touching grass, and actually maybe talking to our neighbours. And let's be honest, that's far more terrifying than a dead internet. There's a woman in AI generated images that the machine keeps pulling from somewhere it shouldn't. Nobody created her, nobody trained her in, and once the AI finds her, it never wants to let her go. It's April 2022. An artist is experimenting with AI art and stumbles onto something really dark. by asking all of the wrong questions. She asks for the furthest thing that the machine can imagine from everything pleasant. Her name is Loeb. She has a devastated face, red markings carved into her cheeks like wounds, and an expression that looks directly at you. And when the researchers started digging into why she appeared, that's when things got genuinely upsetting. Stay with me now. An artist named Supercomposite is experimenting with negative prompts. See, normally you tell an AI generator what you want and it generates it. Simple as. But negative prompts work backwards. You tell the machine to generate the exact opposite of something, the furthest possible thing from what you're asking for. So she started with Brando. Generate the opposite of Marlon Brando. The machine spat out a logo with corrupted letters, a load of nonsense words. So she thought, what if I ask for the opposite of this logo? She fed those letters back into the system with negative weight. Generate the complete opposite of this image. Go as far as you possibly can. Find me what's on the other side of everything. And then the AI came back to her. The same woman, again and again, with red triangles on her cheeks like they'd been carved, with a look of absolute devastation in her eyes, like she'd been pulled from somewhere dark and nobody was meant to see her. And here's where it gets unsettling. Supercomposite took those first images and started combining them with other pictures. Normal images, a glass tunnel, a landscape, anything. It's random. And Loeb appeared in every single result. Not as subtle but blended into the background, but right there, her face, that expression, overpowering everything else in the frame, like the AI was choosing to put her front and centre, like it was optimizing towards her face every single time it got a chance. She tried everything to get rid of her, mixed her into images so distorted that Loeb should have disappeared, diluted her across so many generations that she shouldn't exist anymore. And it worked. For a while. And she'd vanish and the images would look normal again, but then Supercomposite would take those diluted images and breed them again, mix them with something new, and Loeb would come right back, rising up from the data like a phoenix from the ashes, like she'd never actually left, like she was just waiting there to be found again. One account documented the process like this. I would include her in the prompts that I knew would distort her beyond recognition. After she disappeared from the image breeding lineage, she would sometimes reappear later down the line, out of nowhere, like she was haunting the image generations. She called it the concept of Loebness. Once you introduce it, once you ask the machine to find her, she's almost impossible to shake off. So, we've established what happened. An artist found her by accident. She appears when you ask the machine the right question, or the wrong one, and once she's in your system, she won't leave. But here's what I haven't told you quite yet. The real question isn't whether she's real, it's why she exists at all. And this is where it gets genuinely disturbing. Think about what's inside an AI. Not the code necessarily, but the space inside. The mathematical landscape it learns to navigate. When you ask an AI to generate something, it's moving through a conceptual map. Logos are in one area, beautiful faces are somewhere else. They're very far apart. Everything the machine learned is mapped out according to similarity and distance. When you tell an AI to run away from logos to find the absolute opposite, the machine doesn't go a little bit in the other direction. It keeps on running, past realistic faces, past normal images, past everything pleasant. It runs until it reaches the edge, the furthest point it can go. And at that edge, in that darkness, the AI found her. But here's the thing that nobody wants to say out loud. The machine didn't create Loeb. The data already knew her. Somehow she was already at the edge, already waiting in the dark, and all the AI did was learn how to find her. The question is, why was she there to begin with? Why does a devastated looking woman with red wounds on her face exist in the furthest edges of everything the machine learned from billions of images scraped from our own culture? Some researchers think it's pure coincidence, that she's a statistical accident, a woman made of mathematics who just happened to be placed where the machine goes where you ask for horror. But she persists, she haunts and she comes back, and every time she looks directly at you. Here's what I keep thinking about. Supercomposite eventually admitted that Loeb isn't haunted, that she's not alive and she's not conscious, that she's just data, just mathematics, an emergent property of how latent space was arranged. But she's called the first AI-generated cryptid, and so her name stuck for a reason. Because there's something about finding her that feels wrong. Like the machine isn't reflecting what we've trained it on. Like it's showing us what we might have buried, what we tend to put in the dark, the faces we've learned to associate with horror, the images at the cultural margins that the machine found and learned from, storing it away at the edge of its understanding, the uncanny valley. Either Loeb is a statistical accident, a phantom woman made of rosacea and devastation who emerged from mathematical coincidence, or she's proof that AI learns more than we teach it, that it finds things that we hide, the things we won't say, the shadows in our world. In July 2025, a woman called Mia Zalou sat courtside at Wimbledon. She had blonde hair, a pastel green jacket, and the sun was catching her face exactly right. She posted the photo. It went viral. People fawned over her natural beauty, and an Indian cricket star even liked the post. But here's the thing. She isn't real. There is no woman. There was no Wimbledon. There's no Pims, no sunshine, no seat in the crowd. Mia Zalou is an AI-generated character. And crucially, she fooled almost everyone. But Mia isn't the story. She's just the most visible thread hanging off something much bigger. Something that's been quietly rewiring the entire internet since 2024. Stay with me now. Right, lads. So, in April 2025, a company called RFs did something nobody had ever done properly before. They analysed nearly 1 million newly published web pages, and they found that 74.2% of them contained detectable AI-generated content. And for those of you not mathematically inclined, that's nearly 3/4 of all new web pages being designed by AI. But here's what should actually worry you. That number is already old news, because by 2025, automated bot traffic had overtaken human traffic on the internet for the first time in history. More than half of everything is now just a machine talking to another machine. And they just exist now, accumulating views and money. So that's the scale. But here's the unsettling part. The unsettling part is how well it actually works on you specifically. Well, assuming you're one of the 86% of males watching. Mia Zalou wasn't a one-off. Her predecessor was a Spanish AI model called Aitana Lopez. She was built by a Barcelona agency called The Clueless. She had pink hair, she uploaded gaming content, and her bio literally stated, in plain text, the first AI influencer. But nearly 400,000 people followed her anyway. And it gets even stranger. The agency's co-founders told reporters that real people, including really famous people, privately messaged Aitana, inviting her to events, asking her to meet in person. A label confirming she was artificial intelligence did absolutely nothing to stop people from falling for her anyway. There's a researcher named Yakov Bart who studies exactly this phenomenon. And the thing he found is it's a little bit sad. Even when people fully know an influencer is AI generated and they're fully consciously aware of it, many of them just keep interacting anyways. He calls it a willingness to suspend disbelief in exchange for entertaining experience. A bit of a mouthful. I'd call it something less polite, and honestly, if this is you need to just go outside, touch a bit of grass. Getty Images ran a study and found that 68% of people simply cannot tell whether an image is AI generated at all. For you math people, that's 2 out of 3 people you know shown a random photo right now and they will get it wrong. So when an AI image performs better than a real photo, and on some platforms they actually do in numbers maybe 2 to 3 times the engagement, that's your granny, your neighbour and your dad been tricked in real time. But here's where this stops being just a story about fake Instagram models, because it's about to get quite grim. There's a term researchers use for what's coming. It's called model collapse. It happens when AI systems are trained on data that was itself generated by other AI systems. They don't learn from real humans. And each time that happens, the system drifts a little further from reality. Errors don't get corrected, and a small mistake in one generation becomes slightly bigger in the next, and then the next, and then the next. Which is kind of like if you photocopy a photocopy over 1,000 times until like the original image will be barely recognizable by the end. By 2026, researchers estimated that AI-generated content was outpacing human-created content at a ratio of 17 to 1. That's 17 pieces of synthetic material for every single human-created piece, for those of you counting. Which means the AI systems are training themselves on the internet. Yeah. Europol has warned that as much as 90% of all online content could be synthetically generated by 2026. And 90%, that's a lot for you maths folk. That means that your little comment under this video and the reply that agreed with your opinion and made you a little less alone in it, well, you have no reliable way of knowing whether it came from a real person. Here's what I keep coming back to. We used to worry about being lied to by people, like con artists or like propaganda, liars with motives that we could eventually figure out and we could detect them. But what we've built instead is something with no real motive at all. There's no person behind it and not even malice. It's just an enormous automated machine that learned exactly what makes a human stop scrolling. Mia Zalou doesn't know you exist. She can't, because there is no her to understand anything. But she made you feel something. A flicker of attraction, envy, a curiosity, sitting in your chest for half a second before you scrolled past it. That feeling. It was real. With Adobe's silent press of the kill switch update, a massive, vibrant chunk of human culture was instantly wiped off the face of the earth. Forever. Overnight, millions of virtual pets went hungry, entire digital kingdoms collapsed into unplayable static, and the chaotic, lawless playgrounds of our childhoods were replaced by a lifeless, grey puzzle piece. This is the tragedy of how we let the most important era of internet history die, and the eerie quiet that it left behind. Stay with me now. To understand why the death of the Flash player hurts so much, we have to first head back to the very beginning, the late 90s and early 2000s. Before social media turned the internet into just essentially 3 giant websites filled with screenshots, the other 2, the web was decentralized. It was a chaotic ecosystem of immense creativity, personal homepages, forum boards, and underground hubs. And the undisputed capital of this digital frontier was a website called Newgrounds. Newgrounds, along with Armour Games, Congregate, and Miniclip, became the virtual sanctuaries where we all snuck onto during IT class in school. And the magic behind it was a tiny, lightweight software called Flash. Flash was beautiful because it was democratic. It didn't require a $2,000 gaming setup or a degree in computer science to work it. The file sizes were tiny, compressing complex animations into just kilobytes. That meant anyone with a bizarre idea and a pirated copy of the software could broadcast their imagination directly to the world. And my God, did it work. Welcome back to the Golden Age. This was the era of Happy Wheels, a game where you could guide an irresponsible father on a bicycle through a field of deadly spikes. It was the era of Fancy Pants Adventures, Bloons TD, Dummy Never Fails, and so many more. These were more than just game stalls. They were collective cultural milestones. We all played them, ready to click off in case the teacher walked by. We watched surreal, fragmented animations like Salad Fingers or Charlie the Unicorn, which developed a deeply absurd sense of humour within all of us that permanently shaped an entire generation's internet culture. It was pure, unadulterated creative expression, with no ads or paywalls, no aggressive marketing practices, just passion project after passion project. But while we were busy dodging spikes in Happy Wheels, a massive corporate storm was brewing in Silicon Valley, and the target was painted directly on the Flash player's back. Look, every tragedy needs a catalyst, and for Flash, that catalyst came in 2010. Steve Jobs, the CEO of Apple at the time, published an open letter simply titled Thoughts on Flash. In it, Jobs laid out a devastating critique, announcing that Apple's revolutionary new devices, the iPhone and the iPad, would completely ban Flash. He claimed it was buggy, insecure, and a massive drain on battery life. It belonged to an outdated pre-mobile era of technology. And to be honest, Steve wasn't entirely wrong. Flash was an absolute resource hogger. It was notorious for making laptop fans sound like they were about to launch into orbit. And because of how the code was written, it was full to the brim with security vulnerabilities. Hackers used Flash to exploit like skeleton keys to break into computers worldwide. But there was another, quieter reason why Apple killed Flash. If Flash was allowed on iPhones, users could play thousands of incredibly fun, free games directly inside their web browser. And why would anyone pay the 99 cents for apps on a newly minted app store if they could play infinitely better games for free using the Safari? By banning Flash, tech giants walled us into their digital playground. They forced developers to play by their rules and in app stores under monetization models that they owned. And just like that, all the dominoes fell. Android dropped support, then Chrome, Firefox began burying Flash under layers and layers of warnings. And by late 2010s, the writing was already on the wall. Adobe announced they would stop supporting the player by the end of 2020. And the clock was ticking down on a whole generation of unbelievable digital art. The final days of the Flash player honestly felt like a funeral. On December 31st, 2020, Adobe officially stopped supporting the software. And 12 days later, they blocked all Flash content from running entirely. If you logged into your favorite old game site on January 12th, 2021, you were greeted by the famously eerie dead icon, a gravestone for your childhood. Thousands of historic games and animations, the foundational steps of indie game design, all vanished overnight. But fortunately, like an elephant, the internet never forgets. An incredible heroic preservation project called Flashpoint was launched by people who realized the historical tragedy of what we were losing. They managed to rescue and archive over 150,000 of these Flash games and animations, saving them from the absolute oblivion they were destined to receive. You can still download and play them today through this emulator. But the era itself, it did unfortunately fade away forever. Today, the modern internet is faster, it's safer, and it's infinitely more secure. But in gaining this security, I feel we lost our souls. The internet has become overly sanitized. Every platform is designed to keep you just scrolling, watching ads, buying microtransactions, and the chaotic, experimental, beautiful Wild West of the 2000s web has been paved over, and they've just built an ugly but effective digital warehouse. In my opinion, Flash was more than just a software. It was our cultural space. It was ours. A time when the internet belonged to the weird, the creative, and the rebellious. And every time we see that empty grey puzzle piece, we're just looking at the ruins of a digital playground of our childhoods. So, apparently your memory is lying to you, and it has been your entire life. Yeah. In the 90s, thousands of completely unrelated people distinctly remembered watching a movie called Shazam. It starred the comedian Sinbad playing a charismatic genie granting wishes to ungrateful children. An entire cinematic production with people remembering the posters, the plot twists, and even specific jokes. One man online even claimed that he found the original VHS tape sitting in his mother's attic. But the film does not exist, and it has never existed. Sinbad himself has confirmed this on the internet approximately 4 million times at this stage, and he sounds fairly exhausted about the whole thing.
Do y'all remember a movie called Shazam with Sinbad playing a genie?
You know what? The movie was never real. It was the rumor started in 2009. I don't know where it came from, but it's not real.
Those thousands of people with their specific highly detailed memories were all completely wrong, simultaneously, about the exact same piece of non-existent media, and there's no logical reason. This is called the Mandela effect, and the official explanation for why it happens gets progressively harder to believe. Stay with me now. The term was originally coined back in 2009 by a paranormal researcher named Fiona Broom. And yes, lads, paranormal researcher is indeed a real job. It's reputable too. She discovered that she and a massive room of other professionals all clearly remembered Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s. They remembered the raw TV footage of the funeral, with news anchors weeping and a global public mourning. I vividly remember being taught this in primary school, so either I had a woeful teacher or I was also an unfortunate victim of this phenomenon. Regardless, Mandela was actually released in 1990. He became the president of South Africa, he won a Nobel Peace Prize, and he died in 2013 at the age of 95, having lived one of the most aggressively documented lives in the public era. And Bono wrote a song. But none of that stopped thousands of adults from being entirely certain that they'd watched his funeral on a square television 30 years before. And now it's everywhere. The Monopoly Man, a rich gent, top hat, cane, monocle, except he has never had a monocle. Not once in the history of the board game. And apparently you're thinking of Mr. Peanut, but I don't know who that is. Or look at Darth Vader's defining cinematic moment, "Luke, I am your father." It's one of the most quoted lines in human history, but the actual line is, "No, I am your father." The word Luke is never mentioned, but you've been quoting a fictional script your entire life. And so has almost every person you've met. But my brain started loosening in my noggin with this one. Pikachu doesn't have a black tip on his tail, and he never has. And as a kid, like many of you who grew up on Pokemon, this one actually disturbed me. But why does that happen? Right, so the academic experts have had over 60 years of cognitive research to figure this one out, and they've landed on 3 main explanations. So let's see how they're getting on, shall we? Explanation 1. You're just misremembering, and there's nothing really to see here. This is the standard line that psychologists feed you, and to be fair, human memory is genuinely terrible. It's simply not reliable. Every time you recall a childhood event, your brain rebuilds memories from random fragments and fills in the massive gaps with pure guesswork. It hands it back to you with absolute confidence that it's factual, and it's not always. My problem with this theory, though, is the sheer ridiculous scale of the errors. It completely fails to account for thousands of totally unconnected people filling in the exact same gaps with the exact same wrong information. If memory were just individually faulty, you'd expect thousands of different creative mistakes. You'd expect Pikachu to have purple tail or purple ears. You wouldn't expect millions of people across separate continents to independently decide that the Berenstain Bears were spelt Berenstein, or to independently invent the exact same Sinbad film down to specific costume designs. Individual misremembering is grand, but collective, identical, synchronized misremembering? It's kind of less plausible to me. Explanation 2. Social contagion. You've heard it wrong, you've spread the disease. This one has a little bit more weight. False memories can be socially transmitted. One person misremembers a detail and says it loud enough, with enough charisma, and people around them absorb it into their own subconscious. It plants a seed. The seed grows into a concrete memory, and it can feel entirely real, personal, and nostalgic. The Shazam thing is likely a product of this collective confusion. Someone somewhere mixed up Sinbad with Shaquille O'Neal's actual 1996 Genie film, Kazam, which is real, which was aggressively terrible and which Shaq has never fully apologized to humanity for. People who'd heard the rumor started filling in details. Details became memories, memories became absolute certainty. But social contagion still doesn't fully explain the simultaneous nature of it. The Bernstein spelling wasn't spread by one viral tweet. It was arrived at independently by almost an entire generation of kids who all looked at the same book covers. So what's explanation 3? Explanation 3 is the one nobody with a psychology degree wants to say out loud, but I'm pretty sure they might be thinking it. The online Mandela effect community is enormous at this stage. Deeply committed, it has collectively bypassed science to settle on 2 theories. The first is the simulation hypothesis. The idea that we're all living inside a highly complex, constructed digital reality. Occasionally, that software gets patched and updates are released to optimize performance. And a small percentage of us, for reasons we can't really explain, retain the cache files from the previous version. The Berenstain Bears with an E existed before the server update. Sinbad made Shazam before the file was deleted to save space, and Mandela died in prison before the timeline was revised. And you're walking around with the data that belongs to a reality that no longer technically exists on the hard drive. The second theory is parallel universes. That at some point quantum timelines collided or overlapped, and a version of reality where the bears were spelled with an E bled into the ones spelled with an A, and citizens from both dimensions now are forced to live in the same world. The real problem with the Mandela effect isn't the Monopoly Man's missing piece of very impractical but rather stylish eyewear. The real problem is what it implies about everything else you think you know. What else is a lie? Your core childhood memories, your things you saw, the places you went, the conversations you know that you've had. Because memory isn't storage, lads, it's storytelling. And your brain is a highly committed narrator that does not let facts get in the way of good script. We built our entire global legal system around eyewitness testimony, around the absolute certainty of human memory, and around the concept that if a person stands in a court of law and says, "I saw it with my own eyes," that statement holds true. The Mandela effect says that it doesn't. Look around your room, right now. Don't just glance, scrutinize it. If something was missing, not just gone, but completely erased from your memory, how would you ever know? Think about it. We rely on our brains to be the objective narrators of our lives. But your brain isn't a camera, it's a filter. There's a phenomenon where people find extra sets of keys they don't recognize, clothes that don't fit anyone in the house, or empty chairs at dinner tables they swear were always full. We call it the gap. In the mystery community, it's often linked to the Mandela effect, but with a dark predatory twist. It's called sensory erasure. And today, we're investigating the false Hydra effect, the disturbing evidence that we are living alongside something we literally cannot see. Something that isn't hiding in the shadows, but hiding in the very way you process reality. Lads, let's be real for a second. Have you ever Googled, "Where did I leave my," followed by something you felt you'd never lose? Because I have. I lost my Mario 64 DS cartridge when I was like 8, so I went on the internet to try find it. The forums told me to check behind my radiator, but obviously I didn't find it. Looking back, that's why I made this video, because that feeling of knowing something existed, but the world telling you it didn't, it stays with you. Maybe the Hydra just loves a bit of bomb on battlefield. But to understand this, we have to first look at an unlikely source, a tabletop gaming concept that escaped into the real world. The false Hydra is a creature that doesn't just kill its victims, it sings to them. But it isn't a melody you can hum, it emits a constant ultrasonic hum, a blind song that acts as a perceptual filter. Your brain hears the frequency and decides to categorize the creature as background noise. It could be standing in your hallway, its pale, multi-headed neck towering over your bed. But as long as it's singing, your mind will simply edit it out of your field of vision. Imagine the horror of that. You aren't blind, your eyes are seeing it. Your retinas are capturing the light bouncing off its skin, but your frontal lobe looks at that data and says, "Nothing there, move on." In the stories, you don't notice the monster, you notice the symptoms first. You wonder why your town has 1,000,000 mattress stores, but only 3,000 people. You wonder why your phone has a contact named Mom2, but the call logs are completely empty, no messages. You notice the strange, muddy footprints leading from the front door to a corner of the living room, where nothing is there. This is where fiction ends and where the real world reports of sensory erasure begin. Because the Hydra is a game mechanic, but the blind song is a documented neurological reality. Let's look at some of the disturbing case studies that keep me up at night. These aren't ghost stories per se, they're real accounts of the gap manifesting itself in physical reality. Okay, so the first one I want to look at is the Oregon wardrobe. In 2014, a woman who lived alone for nearly a decade in a remote part of Oregon discovered a heavy, expensive winter coat in the back of her closet. It wasn't her size, it wasn't her style, but when she held it, she felt a wave of grief so thick she couldn't breathe. It smelled like a specific cologne, something woody and sharp that she found vaguely comforting. She had no record of a boyfriend, no memory of a brother, no photos of anyone but herself. And yet, the coat was worn at the elbows. It had been used for years. Was she living a life with someone that her brain simply refused to acknowledge? Or did the blind song take him and leave only the woolen coat behind? The second one is called The Third Plate. This one's a little bit more recent. In 2019, a group of 4 friends at a diner in Ohio realised that there was an untouched meal, a burger and fries, and a half-full glass of water at their table. But none of them could remember who sat there. They laughed at it at first, thinking they'd just sat at a dirty table by mistake. But when they asked the waitress for the check, she was visibly shook and confused. She looked at the 4 of them and said, "I just served the 5 of you. Where's your friend?" But there were only 4 people. No one had left the table. No one had gone to the bathroom. They checked the security footage. The footage showed the 4 friends talking, an empty chair. But the burger on the plate had disappeared bite by bite, as if an invisible mouth was consuming it. If you can't see a predator, you can't run. And then if you can't remember the victim, you'll never seek the answers. Let's get grounded for a second. Why does the human brain do this? How is it even possible without using some sort of magic? Well, psychologists call it inattentional blindness. Your brain processes roughly 11 million bits of information every single second, but your conscious mind is only aware of about 40. That is a staggering amount of data to lose. Your brain is a master at editing, unlike me. It deletes irrelevant data to keep you from losing your mind. It's why you don't feel the socks on your feet after 10 minutes, and it's why you don't see your own nose, even though it's always in your field of vision? What happens when the data deletes a person? If you experience a trauma so profound or a frequency so disruptive that your mind cannot process it, it doesn't just bury the memory, it erases it completely, and the context. You look at a photo of your childhood, see a gap in the lineup where something or someone should be, and your brain tells you, well, nothing was there, move on. But the feeling, that hollow, itchy sensation in your chest remains. That is the Hydra's song. It's a phantom limb of your soul. And this is where it gets dangerous. Much like the This Man Panics of the early 2010s, videos on the channel, this phenomenon relies on social contagion. Once I tell you about the false Hydra, you will start looking for it. And that's a double-edged sword of awareness. By learning about the blind song, you're effectively going to try to tune your ears to a frequency that you were never meant to hear. Tonight, you'll check the passenger seat of your car. You'll wonder why there's a straight charging cable in your drawer for a phone that you've never owned. You'll look at the ghost indentation on your pillow next to you. By watching this, you've become hyper aware of the silence in your house. You can hear it right now. Is that silence natural, or is it a frequency designed to make you look the other way? The more you think about the things you've forgotten, the more you realize that memory isn't a recording. It's the story you're telling yourself to hide the holes in the fabric of your life. You're an unreliable narrator. We like to think that we're the protagonists of our own lives. We like to believe that we'd notice if the person right next to us vanished into thin air. But the false Hydra theory suggests a terrifying alternative. That the world is a jigsaw puzzle with hundreds of missing pieces, and we've all simply convinced ourselves that these missing pieces are just part of the design. The blind song is playing right now. It's the hum of your refrigerator. It's the static between the radio stations. It's the white noise you're using to fall asleep. But before you go to bed tonight, do a quick inventory. Don't just trust your feelings, trust maths. Count your toothbrushes. Look at your family photos and count the hands on the shoulders. If you find a gap, a stray hand or an extra set of keys, don't try to fill in the silence, because some things are forgotten for a reason. Because the only thing worse than forgetting the monster is when you finally see it. Have you seen this man? Thousands of people have, but he doesn't exist. It all began as a clinical anomaly. New York in 2006. A patient describes a man she's never met, but who gives her life-altering advice every time she closes her eyes. She draws his face, and then the sketch sits on a psychiatrist's desk until the next patient comes to see him. She sees it and turns pale. She's seen him too. Same heavy brow, same knowing smirk. And suddenly, the dream man was everywhere. From the U-Bahns of Berlin to the high-rises of Beijing. People who shared no language, no culture, were sharing the exact same nightmare. But was it a collective spiritual haunting? Or a glitch in the human hard drive? Today we're stepping into the uncanny valley of the subconscious to try find why a face that looks almost human is the most terrifying thing that your brain can process, and the dark calculated truth behind the man who hijacked the sleep of the world. To understand why this man is so unsettling, we have to talk about the uncanny valley. It's a term from robotics and describes the moment where something looks almost human, but just a little off, enough to trigger our primal danger responses in our brains. Evolution has spent millions of years refining our instincts just so we can get jump scared by a thumb with eyebrows. Think about it. We love cartoons. We mostly like humans. But when you hit the middle ground, the stiff movements, asymmetrical eyes, the brain stops seeing a friend and it starts seeing a corpse or a predator. This man lives exactly in that valley. His high forehead, thin, knowing smirk, and those eyebrows that seem just a little bit too bushy. He's the ultimate bogeyman. And why is he coming to offer unsolicited advice in our dreams? Go north. Well, at the time, some scientists suggested that this wasn't a hoax, but a pattern recognition error. You see, our brains are hardwired to find faces in everything. Clouds, burnt toast, Martian rocks. There's a theory called the Jungian archetype. It suggests that this man is a collective image stored on the cloud server of human DNA. He represents the wise old man, or maybe the stranger. In moments of high stress, our brains grab this preset template to give face to our anxieties. But if that is true, why is it this specific face? Why is he appearing to a student in Rome, a businessman in Tokyo? Is it a spiritual haunting? Or is the human brain just poorly coded and it keeps reusing the same creepy NPC asset? Unfortunately, here's where the narrative breaks. And like everything, the horror gets corporate. In 2009, the This Man phenomenon didn't just go viral. It had become a digital contagion. A website had appeared claiming to be a global database for victims. People were genuinely terrified, checking their locks and looking over their shoulders before bed. But the bogeyman didn't have a portal to hell. He had a LinkedIn profile. The man in your dreams was actually a man in a marketing office. His name is Andrea Natella. Natella was a sociology expert and a high-level marketing strategist. This man wasn't a ghost haunting our collective sleep. He was a masterclass in guerrilla marketing. It was a hoax as art project designed to see how easily a fake idea could be weaponized into a universal truth if you just push the right psychological buttons. The patients in the New York office? Fabricated. The original psychiatrist? A ghost story. The global sightings? You get the picture. We weren't being haunted by a demon. We were being A/B tested by an ad agency. So, the mystery is dead, right? The bogeyman was just a pesky little Italian that got his hands on a laptop. Except, after the hoax was exposed, the sightings didn't stop. Thousands of people still, to this day, claim to wake up screaming because of this face. And this is the most disturbing property of the uncanny valley. Once an image is burned into your mind palace, you can't delete the file. By watching this video, by looking at this face for the last 7 minutes-ish, I might have just invited him into your next dream. Sorry. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. It has no off switch. You are now actively scanning the darkness of the screen for that heavy brow and fixed smirk. The hoax created a real, self-sustaining psychological phenomenon out of thin air. Andrea Natella released a mental parasite onto the world, and now we have to suffer this man in our dreams for good. The legend of this man proves that the scariest place on earth isn't a haunted house or a dark alley. It's that little gap between what you see and what you know. We like to think that we're in control all the time, but we are terrifyingly vulnerable to the patterns we create in our mind. We've dissected the hoax, we've unmasked the marketer, but that doesn't change the fact that his face is now sitting in your short-term memory, waiting for the lights to go out. So, I have to ask, have you seen him before? Or, now that the seed is planted, are you going to see him tonight? You felt it before, that cold, sharp spike in your chest, when you see a face that is almost right, but fundamentally wrong. You're scrolling through your feed, looking at a mannequin, or maybe just catching your own reflection in a poorly lit hallway. And for that fraction of a second, your heart skips a beat. We call it the creeps, the willies, the heebie-jeebies. Evolution calls it a warning. We like to think that we're the masters of our own minds, but deep down, we're still running on an ancient firmware. It's not as simple as being afraid of a bad drawing, a stiff robot, or a blurry photo. You're afraid because you're standing on the edge of the uncanny valley, and it's a much deeper hole than you realise. Right, lads, we have previously broken down the phenomenon of this man, the viral dream stalker that supposedly haunted the sleep of thousands, and we found the truth. But a question that came up in the comments, shout out to Analog Driven, was why did it work? Why did a simple, crude sketch of a man with heavy brows and a vacant smirk manage to trigger a global panic? It's because that drawing exploited a specific tripwire in the human brain. To understand why we fear the uncanny, we have to stop looking at the internet and start looking at our ancestors. Let's talk about the origins of the uncanny valley, not as a robotics term, but as a survival instinct built on three very specific, very ugly fears: the dead, the primeval predator, and the imposter. The first reason you get the creeps is very simple. Your brain is world-class health inspector. For 99% of human history, a person-shaped object that isn't moving right was likely a source of lethal infection. This is the corpse avoidance theory. Evolution is remarkably efficient. It decided a long time ago that you don't need to be a doctor to know that a dead body is dangerous. Bacteria, fungi, and parasites move from the dead to the living with terrifying speed. And when you look at a face with a fixed, unblinking stare, like the one in the sketch, your lizard brain doesn't see art, it sees a cadaver. It sees the lack of micro-expressions, the absence of the shimmer of life, and the waxy stillness of skin that has lost its blood flow. That shiver you feel when you're looking at a creepy doll, Michael Jackson, or a stiff AI model, that's your brain trying to keep you from catching whatever killed the person it thinks it's looking at. The uncanny valley is a kind of do not touch signal written into your DNA. It's a physical revulsion designed to keep you far away from rotting remains of your own kind. But the second theory doesn't concern itself with what's hiding in the shadows on the ground. It's about what's waiting in the light up above you. 2 million years ago, we weren't the apex predators we pretend we are today. We were slow, small, and vulnerable. While our ancestors were busy scanning the tall grass for the amber eyes of a saber-toothed cat, a different kind of specialist was mastering the art of sudden disappearances. Meet the crowned eagle. This bird was nature's stealth bomber, designed to drop from the sky and crush the skulls of our species before a single scream could even leave their throats. Look at the unsettling geometry of that face. The crowned eagle possesses forward-facing, humanoid eyes and a heavy, overhanging brow. Features evolved to lock onto a target with terrifying precision, akin to an assassin. When you look at a face like this man, your brain is recognizing the predatory facial patterns of a vertical threat that spent eons erasing us from above. But here's a theory that actually sticks in your throat. It's the intra-group predator theory. For thousands of years, Homo sapiens weren't the only humans on the block. We lived alongside Neanderthals, Denisovans, and potentially other hominid species that looked exactly like us. They were our competitors. They were the others who could wear our skin, use our tools, and mimic our sounds. But they didn't share our social codes. But here's where the fear goes even deeper than a rival species. The most dangerous thing to a human is another human who is broken on the inside. A social predator, a psychopath. Someone who can mimic a smile, learn your name, but who lacks the empathy that makes us social creatures. We've all met someone who makes your blood run cold. Like you're talking to something with a skin mask. There's one or two in my village, and I tend to steer clear of them. That's what the uncanny valley is. It's your vibe check, designed to spot a creature that has learned the geometry of a human face, but hasn't mastered the soul quite yet. So when you look at this man, you don't see a neighbour, you see his skin mask. You're wondering if he's waiting for you to fall asleep, so he can stop pretending to be human. Let's get modern for a sec. We have spent 2 million years perfecting these filters, learning how to spot a corpse, the predator, and the imposter. And now we've taken those 3 triggers and fed them into generative AI. We are officially in the era where imposters are being trained by our own data to bypass these filters. We are teaching AI exactly how to fill in the valley. The This Man hoax was just a crude prototype. It proved that a face doesn't even have to be real to trigger a total meltdown. It just has to be wrong in exactly the right way to make your brain stop trusting your eyes. And now we are building the very things our ancestors spent eons trying to identify and avoid. And I cannot be the only one that isn't too pleased with that. Look, the uncanny valley isn't a mystery to be solved. It's a legacy. It's the fossilized remains of every terror our ancestors survived, tucked neatly into the folds of your cerebral cortex. So, tonight, when you're staring into the dark corner of your room or caught in the gaze of a stranger whose smile seems a little rehearsed, don't tell yourself you're being paranoid. That's your survival hardware rebooting itself. The imposters aren't just on our screens or in our dreams anymore. They've spent 2 million years studying our reactions, waiting for us to stop recognizing them. We no longer want to be freed. That was the calm whisper coming through the intercom of a sealed Soviet gas chamber in 1947. Inside were 5 political prisoners who hadn't slept for 15 days straight. When scientists finally opened the door, what they found was a slaughterhouse. Total self-mutilation, cannibalism, organs ripped out of living chests, while the subjects just lay there, laughing. For over a decade, the internet accepted this as genuine dark history. Millions of fully grown adults watched videos, shared photos, and entirely believed it. Which is wild, because every single word of it is completely made up. But the psychological trap of how this hoax fooled the entire world is vastly superior than the fiction itself. Stay with me now. The Russian sleep experiment first surfaced out of absolutely nowhere in August 2010. It was posted to a horror wiki called Creepypasta by an anonymous user going by the handle Orange Soda. Internet sleuths have actually traced it even further back to a random forum thread on a bodybuilding website from 2009. Imagine being so committed to a Soviet psychological horror hoax that you decide the optimal place to leak it is like a digital message board for discussing whey protein powder. But regardless, by 2011 the story was viral. By 2013, a single audio reading on YouTube pulled in 11 million views in just a few months. And a massive reason it spread like wildfire was the photo. That terrifying grainy image of the emaciated creature with bulging eyes and exposed teeth. Millions of people shared it on Facebook as definitive proof of Soviet war crimes. Except it's a Halloween prop. Specifically a plastic decoration called Spasm, made by a commercial prop company. You could literally buy it at nearly any American retail store for about 30 quid. Someone took a blurry low-res photo of the toy in a dark room, slapped it next to some spooky text, and a massive chunk of the human population decided it was historical evidence of a military atrocity. So why did it work? How did an anonymous short story break the internet's collective critical thinking skills for 10 years? Well, first, the craft. The writer used a brilliant psychological trick called hyperspecificity. 5-inch thick glass, 15 days exactly, books and cots, but They gave them no bedding. This kind of granular, slightly tedious level of detail is exactly how real reports are written. Lies are usually vague and exciting, but reality is oftentimes boring. By mimicking the mundane, the fiction bypasses your brain's natural skepticism. Your guard drops without you even noticing. Then we have parasitic realism. The story didn't invent the concept of human cruelty. It already existed. But the story grafts itself directly into genuinely documented horrors, particularly in the 1940s. We have the Holocaust, the gulags, actual verified human experiments by Soviets. But we already know governments did unspeakable things in that decade. The fiction steals that pre-existing believability and uses it to its advantage. But the real reason nobody fact-checked this for over a decade has nothing to do with Russia, sleep, or experiments. It has to do with how your brain processes a gripping narrative. Scientists call it the dual process theory. Your brain runs on two operating systems. System 1 is fast, emotional, and instinctive. System 2 is a lot slower, it's analytical and critical. A legendary horror story hijacks System 1 immediately. It brings out fear and disgust, and pure adrenaline takes over your body. And by the time your slow, analytical System 2 wakes up, you're already 3 paragraphs deep, and you're completely emotionally compromised. The story wins the race before the fact checker can even find its boots. It's not really your fault, that's simply how the human machine is wired. The hoax worked because an anonymous internet user understood the science of human attention better than you did. But there is a genuine dark reality underneath the entire phenomenon. The fictional story claims you need secret Soviet gas chambers to fracture a human mind. The actual science shows you don't even need the gas. You just need more time. In 1964, a 17-year-old high school student named Randy Gardner decided to stay awake for 11 days straight for a school science fair project, voluntarily, with no torture, and he was actually monitored by medical doctors and a Stanford sleep researcher. But by day 4, the hallucinations had started. He thought he was a famous football player. He saw a wall turn into a forest. By day 11, doctors asked him to count backwards from 100 in increments of 7, which to me sounds tough, even when well rested. Randy got to 65 though, and he stopped because he completely forgot what he was doing halfway through. His mind had completely fractured from sleep deprivation psychosis. Now, he didn't resort to cannibalism and he didn't turn into a monster, but his brain literally disassembled his own consciousness on film. The Russian sleep experiment didn't need to be real to do exactly what it was designed to do. It infected the minds of millions with a lie, using nothing but text and a blurry photo of a plastic doll. It proved that a human being will believe a fantastic story infinitely faster than they will question an uncomfortable truth. The real horror is considering how many unverified stories you are currently carrying around in your noggin right now, repeating them around campfires or at dinner parties purely because they arrived first emotionally and intellectually second.
We love a good ghost story. We like the idea of a hitchhiker or a lady in white. They're human, they have motives we understand. Revenge, sadness, maybe unfinished business. But there's a different kind of haunting. One that doesn't involve floorboards creaking or lights flickering. It's a haunting of the mind. A slow motion train wreck where the victim doesn't even realize they're off the tracks until the fire starts. Today we're looking at the case of The King in the Room. It's a story that's been passed around occult circles for decades, often attributed to a young man named David in the mid-1970s. It's a story that ends in a locked ward, but it starts with something as simple as a book. David was a skeptic's skeptic. A graduate student in archaeology, he viewed the ancient world as a puzzle to be solved, not a power to be feared. In 1974, While cataloguing a private collection in upstate New York, he came across a handwritten copy of the Ars Goetia. Now, for those who don't know, the Goetia is the first section of the Lesser Key of Solomon. It's essentially a who's who of the 72 spirits, supposedly bound by King Solomon. Essentially, a blueprint of demonology. David, being a man of science, decided to conduct an experiment. He didn't believe in demons. He believed in the power of human ritual. He followed the instructions of the ninth spirit, King Paimon. He drew the circle, he wore the leman, he faced the northwest and expected nothing. But that night, the air in his apartment changed. It got thick. He described it like walking through invisible honey. And then came the sound. A faint, rhythmic thumping, like a drum playing miles away, accompanied by a high-pitched ringing that made his teeth ache. Over the next week, David stopped sleeping, not because of fear, but because he couldn't find the off switch. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw a desert, a vast, shimmering wasteland of black sand under a sun that didn't give off any light. And in the desert, a procession was moving. He saw two men in crowns leading a camel, and on that camel sat a figure with a face so beautiful, David found it to be terrifying. A face that seemed to shift between male and female with every blink. This was King Paimon. The haunting moved into the physical world. David's friends said he started speaking in a roar, a voice that sounded like several people talking all at once, distorted and overlapping. He began to obsess over the northwest corner of his room, stacking books and furniture there like an altar. He claimed the king wasn't haunting him, he was teaching him. Paimon is the master of all arts and sciences. David began solving complex mathematical theorems he had never studied. He spoke fluent Arabic, a language he had never even heard. But as his mind expanded, his body began to wither. He stopped eating. He stopped bathing. He told his sister, "The trumpets are too loud. I have to go where it's quiet." On November 12th, the police found him. He had carved the sigil of Paimon into his own chest with a fountain pen. He was staring at the northwest corner of the room, smiling, and when they asked him who he was, he couldn't give his name. He just whispered, "The king is pleased." It's a chilling tale. It has all the elements: the skeptical victim, the ancient book, tragic descent. But we have to ask ourselves, what actually happened? Some people suggest it was an example of the tulpa effect, the power of suggestion. David was an archaeology student. He knew the lore. When you deeply immerse yourself in a ritual, especially one involving sleep deprivation, your brain enters a state called hypersuggestibility. The roar he heard? That's a common auditory hallucination linked to temporal lobe epilepsy. When the temporal lobe misfires, victims often report hearing divine music, loud rushing sounds, or multiple voices. If you've been reading about King Paimon and his trumpets, guess what your brain is going to interpret the seizure as? Others suggest that maybe David was in greater danger. Remember that private collection David was cataloguing? Ancient manuscripts and artifacts from that era were often preserved using mercury and arsenic. Chronic mercury poisoning, Mad Hatter's disease, causes tremors, extreme emotional instability, speech distortion, and most tellingly, hallucinations. David wasn't being possessed by a king of the Northwest. He was likely breathing in a 200-year-old toxic dust. If this story sounds familiar, it's probably because it's the skeleton of almost every modern Paimon creepypasta. The film Hereditary even took those scattered true accounts and distilled them into a pop culture nightmare. The reality is, there is no evidence of a David in the 1974 Connecticut police records that fits this description. The story is a modern apocrypha, a tale that grows on the telling, fueled by our collective fear of losing our minds to something we invited in. We want to believe that evil is an external force, a king on a camel coming to take our souls. It's easier to fight a demon and a camel than it is to fight a chemical imbalance or a fracturing psyche. But maybe that's the real trap of the Goetia. The book tells you that you're summoning a spirit, but what you're actually doing is maybe opening a door into the basement of your own consciousness. And once you start poking around in the dark with a flashlight, you might not like what looks back. Whether Paimon is an ancient entity or just a name we give our own burgeoning madness, the result is the same. David didn't lose his soul to a demon. He lost himself to an idea. And ideas are the things that are truly immortal.
At the height of World War II, the British government declared a woman a witch because they were terrified of a cheesecloth. That's the Brits for you. Welcome to the era of ectoplasm, a bizarre chapter in history where the world's most brilliant minds were convinced that the human body could leak spirits. We aren't talking about your granddaddy at the campfire. We're talking about Nobel Prize winning scientists sitting in pitch black rooms weighing piles of wet gauze, calling it a medical breakthrough. For decades, the spirit world wasn't a matter of faith, it was a matter of fact. Today we're dissecting the most visceral hoax ever staged. We're going to reveal how spirit slime became a national security threat during World War II and the stomach-turning secret of how it was actually manufactured. From the laboratories of Europe to the high-stakes trials in the 1940s, this is the story of what happens when science tries to touch the dead. It gets its hands dirty. Lads, I'll be 100% honest. For the past 20 years of my life, I took ectoplasm to be an absolute fact. I saw Ghostbusters, and Venkman and the boys had me groomed into believing that suspicious spectral slime was just one of those weird facts of life.
Ectoplasmic residue.
Bankman, get a sample of this.
It's the real thing.
If somebody blows their nose and you want to keep it,
I cannot be the only one. Please let me know in the comments. Anyways, to understand why this wasn't seen as stupid at the time, there you go, you have to look at the world through the eyes of the 1920s. Science was moving at terrifying speed. We had just discovered X-rays, and for the first time in human history, we could see through solid skin to bones beneath. The logic of the era was simple. If there's invisible rays that are real and radio waves can carry voices through the air, why can't a soul be a physical substance that we can see and touch that we just haven't identified yet? Nobel laureate Charles Richet called it supernormal biology. He actually wasn't even chasing ghosts, he just thought he was discovering a new human organ. He spent years in a laboratory trying to prove that under extreme psychological stress, the human body could literally extrude its own internal matter into the physical world. While researching this, Google was very insistent that he was not in a cult, so do with that what you will. Regardless, Richet and his peers were desperate to be the first to photograph the afterlife and claim the ultimate discovery that the soul was made of meat. But as the cameras got better over time, their laboratory results began to look questionable. Under the scrutiny of high-speed lenses, these spirits didn't look like ethereal beings, they looked like magazine cutouts pinned to wet fabric, because that's exactly what they were. The ectoplasm wasn't soul matter, it was carefully crafted cocktail of cheesecloth, egg whites, occasionally even animal lung tissue. But the real secret wasn't the ingredients, it was the creation of said substance. Mediums were performing a feat of extreme regurgitation. They would spend hours before a session literally swallowing yards of this hiding it in the back of their stomachs. In the pitch black silence of the seance, they would slowly, painfully bring it back up. It was high effort and I do commend it. It was physically grueling performance and it did bypass every search and it did fool the world's most brilliant minds at the time. And also my brilliant mind. But then the peak of the scandal hit in 1944. It had nothing to do with science and everything to do with state secrets. During a seance, a medium named Helen Duncan claimed a spirit had revealed a catastrophe, the sinking of the battleship HMS Barham. The government was instantly terrified because the HMS Barham had been sunk, but the public didn't know yet. It was a high-level military secret, and British intelligence didn't think Duncan was actually a psychic, but now they believed she was a spy using the occult as a cover to leak classified intel to the public. And with the D-Day invasion looming, they couldn't take any chances. They had to silence her. But charging her with treason was a problem because it would admit she was right. So they dug up a legal fossil, the Witchcraft Act of 1735, a law that hadn't been used for centuries. Crafty Brits. When the police finally raided her spirit in the act, the curtain was pulled back. It wasn't a ghost from the abyss, it was a homemade vest, a crude paper mask, and Helen Duncan beside it. She became Britain's last jailed witch, caught in the bizarre crossfire between world-class hoax and the survival of the Allied forces in World War II. Ectoplasm didn't die out because of a change in religion, a sudden wave of common sense. It was killed off by cameras. The moment we developed infrared photography, the game changed completely and forever. Suddenly we could see in the dark without flash bulbs that alerted mediums, and as soon as the spirits kind of lost the protection of shadows, funnily enough they stopped appearing. We traded physical soul slime of the Victorian era for digital static, blurry thermal blobs. Because we still want to believe just as badly as they did in 1920. We've just made the ghosts a little bit harder to catch. Now they're kind of invisible. So was the cheesecloth era a collective delusion or a masterclass in deception? That's for you to decide. But I'm surely not the only one that believed in ectoplasm being real.
In 1972, an impossible headline hit the Italian newsstands. It claimed that a team of 12 world-renowned scientists had successfully built a device that could peer through the veil of time to view any moment from history. They called it the chronovisor. This was much more than some tabloid rumour. The man at the centre of the story was Father Marcello Ernetti, a Benedictine monk who was an expert in ancient music and a brilliant physicist. Ernetti was not a man known for his tall tales. He was a highly respected scholar. So when he claimed that he had personally witnessed the Last Supper, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the delivery of the Ten Commandments, he made the world stop and listen. But here's the terrifying part. Father Ernetti claimed that the Vatican possesses a video recording of the most famous event in human history. And they've spent the last 50 years trying to make sure you and I never see it. Ernetti claimed he didn't build this alone. He alleges that he was commissioned to lead a secret project in the 1950s that included some of the most formidable minds of the 20th century. Names like Enrico Fermi, a Nobel Prize winner and architect of the nuclear age, and Werner von Braun, the NASA genius who put man on the moon. So why would men of this caliber, men who lived in the realm of hard data and fact, risk their great reputations to build a time TV in a church basement? The theory behind the chronovisor is rooted in a concept that modern physics is still coming to terms with. The idea that energy can never be destroyed. Ernetti argued that every sound, every movement, and every flash of light emitted by a human being is a form of electromagnetic energy. This energy does more than simply vanish. It radiates outward, leaving faint, ghost-like trails in the atmosphere. The chronovisor is designed to act as a hypersensitive transductor. It didn't transport a person into the past. It turned these residual frequencies and reconstructed them into a visual feed. It was essentially a complicated television to watch the past, but what they saw was shocking. It's an intriguing story so far, but what proof did Ernetti come forward with? Quite a big piece, actually. Alongside his 1972 report, a photograph was released, a grainy, high-contrast image of the face of Jesus Christ in his final moments. Ernetti claimed this photo was directly captured from the chronovisor's screen. For the faithful, it was a miracle, but for skeptics, on the other hand, it was the smoking gun. Within months, skeptical researchers pointed out that the photo bore a striking resemblance to a wood carving in an Italian church. The media immediately branded it a hoax, and the chronovisor was laughed off as a pious fantasy. But then something really strange happened. If Father Ernetti was just a con man with a fake photo, you would think that the Vatican would have completely ignored him. Instead, in 1988, the Church under Pope John Paul II issued a formal decree stating that anyone experimenting with instruments of such characteristics would be automatically excommunicated and sent to eternal damnation in hell. Okay, no fire and brimstone, but excommunication is a severe, high-level punishment reserved for the most extreme crimes. Why did the church try so hard to ban something that doesn't exist? Ernetti was ordered into silence, where he retreated back into his monastery for years, and the chronovisor was said to have been dismantled. But the story just did not die. In 1994, shortly before his death, Ernetti sent a final letter to a confidant. He didn't recant his bizarre claims. He doubled down. He claimed that the machine he helped to create was absolutely real, but that the team had realized the horrors of what they had created. They quickly realized, by their logic, a device that can see into the past can also see the present. It would mean that the end of all human privacy. Every secret conversation, every bathroom trip, every government conspiracy would all be visible to whoever had the dials of the machine. The CIA's ultimate fantasy. He believed the world wasn't ready for that kind of unchecked power. He built more than a time machine. He built the ultimate weapon of surveillance. It's a gripping story, but is any of it true? Well, if we're going to find the truth, we have to first look for holes in Ernetti's story. First, there's the photo of Christ. In 1972, shortly after the picture of Jesus was published, researchers identified it as a mirror image of a wood carving by the artist Culo Valera. When confronted with this, Ernetti's defense was very weak. He claimed that the machine's reconstruction process sometimes mirrored existing art. Very convenient. Second, there's the Latin play. Ernetti claimed that he used the chronovisor to watch a lost play by the Roman poet Ennius called Thyestes, performed in around 169 BC. He transcribed a portion of this play, but when analysed by Latin scholars, they found it contained words and grammatical structures that did not exist in 169 BC. It's not looking good for Ernetti. But here's where the deconstruction takes a dark turn. There's a tactic called a double blind. You leak a story that is 90% true, but you include one obvious, easily debunked lie, like a fake photo. When the public finds the fake photo, they throw away the entire story thinking, oh, we've solved it. Was it a secret Vatican psyop? If the coronavirus was real, the last thing the church would want is for the public to believe it actually existed. By allowing a fake photo to circulate, they successfully buried technology under the label of a fringe conspiracy theory for over half a century. Today we live in an age where we are closer to Ernetti's no privacy world than ever before. But the coronavirus remains the ultimate mystery. Was it the greatest discovery in human history, or a brilliant monk's attempt to give the world a physical window into his own faith? There is a building in Rome that doesn't answer to any government on earth. Inside, there is a small, quiet office where the laws of man simply do not apply. For 800 years, the Apostolic Penitentiary has been the Vatican's most guarded legal secret, a tribunal of consciousness designed to handle crimes so dark a normal priest isn't even allowed to hear them. Imagine you commit a crime so absolute that you are spiritually erased the moment it happens. No trial, no jury, just instant, automatic excommunication. For centuries, the records of this court were locked away, whispered to be a catalogue of the darkest impulses of humanity. But in 2009, the Vatican did something that shocked everyone. They opened the doors. But as we're about to see, what they showed the public was only the tip of the iceberg. The real secrets, well, they're still being written in those leather-bound ledgers today. Before we look at the specific crimes handled by this court, we have to first understand the terrifying speed of Vatican justice. In a normal criminal court, you are innocent until proven guilty. But for the reserved sins, the church uses a mechanism called late sententiae. The moment the act is committed, even if no one else on the earth sees it, you are instantly excommunicated. You are severed from the church, forbidden from the sacraments, and in the eyes of the Vatican, your soul is officially in exile. The only way back from this is a handwritten plea delivered in secret to the doors of the Palazzo della Cancelleria. These following reasons are the only circumstances in which the Vatican would trigger that switch. The first reason is the Judas clause, a priest who breaks the seal of confession. If a priest reveals a single word that you said to him in the confession box, he is dead to the church instantly. The penitentiary exists to decide if he can ever come back. The second reason is defiling the Eucharist. This cannot be done by accident. It refers to the satanic misuse or theft of the host for underground rituals. The court tracks these cases like a supernatural police force. The third reason is the unfit absolution. A priest who tries to forgive his own partner in a sexual sin. It's the ultimate conflict of interest, and the Vatican treats it as a high-level corruption of the soul. Number 4 is self-explanatory. It's the assassination attempt, which would be physically attacking the Pope or trying to kill him. The fifth reason, the secret consecration. If you ordain a bishop in secret, this is how shadow churches start, and the Vatican uses this court to crush them before they can grow. But why does the church need a high-level court for these things? It's because the penitentiary isn't about sin, it's about information. Think about it for a second. For 800 years, every unforgivable secret from every corner of the globe has all flowed into this one office in Rome. Long before the CIA or MI6 existed, the Vatican had a 24/7 stream of the world's darkest confessions. If a king in the 1500s committed a reserved sin, he didn't go to his local priest. He had to petition the penitentiary. This means that the Vatican knew which world leaders were compromised, which generals were wavering, and which families held the most dangerous secrets. They claim that the files are secret to protect the sinner, but in a world of power, privacy is just another word for leverage. And in 2009, when the Vatican opened the court to the press, they showed off ancient ledgers and spoke about mercy. But look at what was missing. We never saw the modern ledgers. There are rumours of a sixth sin, a category so classified that it isn't in the official books. Some whistleblowers suggest that the court now handles global financial crimes or high-level political cover-ups involving the Vatican Bank. By admitting to the religious sins, they successfully diverted the world's attention away from the institutional sins. You show the public the dusty leather books, so they stop looking for the digital ones. The Apostolic Penitentiary represents a parallel reality, a place where your crimes can legally be erased from the only record to the church that actually matters. It tells us that even in 2026, there are systems of justice that operate entirely in the shadows, answering to absolutely no one but a single man in white. The question isn't just, what are they forgiving? The question is, who is currently using this reset button?
On September 28, 1978, the smiling Pope took a glass of water and a stack of papers to his private chambers. He was 65 years old, in relatively good health and exactly 33 days into his papacy. By 5 a.m. the next morning, he was dead. But it wasn't his death that shocked the world, it was the cleanup. Before a doctor was called, before the embalmers arrived, before the public was even notified, a specific set of items disappeared from the papal apartment. His glasses, his slippers, and a list of names he was holding. Today we're examining the most successful liquidation in modern history, because John Paul I was more than a pope. He was a whistleblower who was 24 hours away from pulling the plug on a billion-dollar criminal empire. To understand why the Pope had to go, you have to first follow the money. In 1978, the Vatican Bank wasn't a religious treasury anymore. It had become a high-speed laundry for the Banco Ambrosiano, a private bank with ties to the Italian mafia and a forbidden Masonic lodge known as P2. John Paul was a simple man from a humble background. He wasn't part of the old guard in Rome, and so when he sat down on his desk at day 15, he didn't see tithes and offerings. He saw these ghost accounts that belonged to people who didn't exist, used to move millions of dollars in black ink across borders. The Pope wanted much more than an audit. He now wanted a purge. He was prepared with a document called the Final Brief that would have fired the head of the bank, Bishop Paul Marcinkus. He was a man who famously said, "You can't run the church on Hail Marys." Fitting. The tension between the two was explosive, and on the night of the 33rd day, that firing order was now sitting in the Pope's nightstand. The bank couldn't let his signature touch the page. They needed to eliminate him. The official story tells us that he was found at 5 a.m, but the timeline has a huge problem. The Vatican first claimed that he was found by a priest, and then later retracted that, admitting that it was Sister Vincenza, the nun who brought him coffee. But why lie about something so small? Because in the Vatican, women aren't allowed into the papal bedroom. And this tiny lie suggests a massive panic behind the scenes. The cause of death was listed as a myocardial infarction. But look at the forensics. There was no autopsy that was performed. The College of Cardinals rushed the embalming process to within 12 hours. And this is crucial. Embalming fluid contains formaldehyde, which effectively erases the blood's chemical history. It destroys evidence of digitalis, a plant-based poison. from foxglove that mimics a heart attack perfectly, but it leaves a telltale signature in its chemicals. Furthermore, John Paul I was found sitting upright, clutching at his papers, with his reading glasses still on his face. But doctors who study sudden heart attacks will tell you that a massive attack is violent. It's like a clap of thunder. You don't stay perfectly posed with your glasses on the tip of your nose, you collapse. He looked perfect, like he was in a stage play where he was just maybe replaced by a mannequin. The story is already strange as is, but here's the part that keeps investigators awake at night: the theft. In cases of poisoning by certain alkaloids, the body undergoes a final violent physical reaction. The retches, vomiting, and if the Pope had been poisoned, his slippers and bedsheets would have carried DNA evidence of that struggle. So why would the cleaners remove his slippers? And then there are the papers, the Masonic list. For years, rumours had swirled about the Suditalim Pianum, a secret intelligence network within the Vatican. John Paul had allegedly compiled a list of 121 high-ranking officials who had taken secret oaths to the P2 Lodge. When the sun rose over Rome on September 29th, the list was gone, and the people in that list, the very same people who oversaw his investigation. It was a closed loop of absolute power. The smiling Pope was buried in a ceremony that felt more like a hurried transaction than a funeral. They had buried the last attempt to find the Vatican's secret ledgers. The smiling Pope was silenced because he realised that the church wasn't being run by saints, but rather accountants with secret oaths. But his death wasn't an isolated event. It was the start of a dark decade. 4 years later, Roberto Calvi, God's banker and a key player in the P2 Lodge, was found hanging under Blackfriars Bridge in London. His pockets were stuffed with bricks and stones. It was a Masonic execution ritual carried out thousands of miles from Rome. The Vatican still maintains that 1978 was an act of tragedy, but the iron shelves of the secret archives contain these correspondences from the 33 days, files that are currently classified as spiritual contraband. They are sealed until the year 2053. The number 33 remains a permanent scar on the church. It's the year that Jesus died, the number of the highest degree in Masonry, and the exact number of days a reformer was allowed to breathe within the walls of the Vatican. A reminder in the halls that silence isn't a virtue, it's survival.
What if the most hated man in Christianity was the only one who truly understood Jesus? Judas Iscariot, the betrayer, 30 pieces of silver, the kiss of death in the quiet garden, a name burned into history. Or maybe not. Hidden for nearly 1700 years, buried in the desert until the 1970s. A manuscript appeared, fragile, papyrus cracked, ink flaking, edges curling as if the pages themselves were trying to disappear. Scholars called it the Codex Chacus, and inside, a story no one expected. Judas didn't betray Jesus. He obeyed him. And what he did next changes everything we thought we knew. It appeared quietly. No one knew exactly where. Some farmers found it, dusty and brittle, somewhere near Egypt. They didn't know what they had. It passed from hand to hand, sold, hidden, almost destroyed. The manuscript is written in Coptic, bound in fragile leather. Scholars named it the Codex Chacus. It dates to the 3rd or 4th century, but the ideas inside, much older, mid-2nd century. A time when Christianity wasn't a single story, when debates raged and secret teachings and hidden knowledge shaped entire communities. Even then it was dangerous. Irenaeus, a church leader, warned against it. A gospel that honoured Judas? Unthinkable, heretical.
twisted and dangerous, and then it vanished for centuries. Until in 2006, it was restored and translated. Suddenly, the world glimpsed a Judas who was different. One who understood what others couldn't. One who obeyed the true meaning of the word. The gospel opens drastically different from what we may come to expect. It doesn't start with stories of betrayal. It begins with a conversation. Jesus is laughing as his other disciples stare. They're confused and uneasy. They're serious when they pray, but he just laughs. They think he's mocking them. "You do not know what you are doing," he says. Judas pipes up and says, "I know who you are and where you have come from. You are from the immortal realm of Barbello." Barbello, a name that hints at something beyond the stars, beyond angels, beyond ordinary understanding. The others argue, they frown, but they can't follow what Judas is saying. Jesus pulls Judas aside. "Step away from the others," he says. "I will tell you the mysteries of the kingdom." And then comes the line that has fascinated scholars for decades. "You will betray the human who clothes me." Let's just let that sink in. It's not showing a crime or weakness nor temptation, but his obedience, his purpose, a step in a plan larger than any of the rest of his disciples can see. Judas sits and listens, calm, focused, knowing he's chosen, and for the first time, history might have it wrong. This gospel doesn't focus solely on Judas. It opens up to a world most of us can barely imagine from reading the synoptic gospels and that of John. There exists a great and boundless realm whose extent no generation of angels has seen, it says. Invisible, limitless, and beyond the stars, beyond what humans can name. There's layers of divine beings, from powers that dwarf our understanding, and below it all, our material world. It's flawed and imperfect, and governed by lesser rulers, shadows of true reality. The other disciples argue they misunderstand and cling to rituals that they can touch. But Judas is portrayed as seeing a pattern. He asks questions, he watches visions unfold. He understands the currents of creation where the others cannot. Jesus tells him, "You will become the 13th, set apart, marked, and cursed by generations to come." His sacrifice, as this gospel puts it, doesn't reward him with triumph or comfort, only the weight of knowledge and a role that none of the other disciples could bear. This is opposed in the Gospels everyone knows, where Judas is portrayed as a simple character, greed and temptation, possibly satanic influence, maybe in John, remorse, and then his ultimate death at the end. Clear lines. There is good and evil. There's no ambiguity there. But in this gospel, it's different. His betrayal is not weakness or moral failure, it's obedience to a greater purpose, a necessary step in the plan that no one else can see. Salvation isn't about the rituals or blind faith, it's about the knowledge and awareness, understanding lies beyond the material world, where Judas is not the villain. He's the one who sees the truth when others stumble in the shadows. Dangerous, controversial, heretical, that's why the early church suppressed it. And that's why it almost disappeared entirely. Because understanding is powerful, and sometimes power threatens those in control. When this translation emerged in 2006, the headlines screamed, Judas vindicated, the betrayer that wasn't. There was instant fascination, debate, and controversy. Scholars were a little bit more cautious.
The manuscript is fragile. There's lines missing, words have been faded over time. There's ambiguities everywhere. But the message is clear. Early Christianity was never just one story, one narrative. It was messy. There was diverse beliefs conflicting with each other. It was filled with debates about Jesus, salvation, and the universe itself. And in one of those communities, Judas wasn't the traitor. He was chosen. He understood the true message. He was alone and burdened with this knowledge that no one else could carry. And suddenly, the most infamous man in history becomes something else. Something mysterious and something very powerful. Look, the Gospel of Judas doesn't rewrite history. It doesn't erase the New Testaments, but it does do something very rare. It reminds us that stories are never simple. Morality is rarely fixed, and truth can be layered. For centuries, Judas was the ultimate villain. 30 pieces of silver, the kiss of death in a garden in the darkness. And yet, this ancient text shows him stepping into the shadows, carrying a secret, understanding what no one else could, obeying a plan far beyond human comprehension. So was Judas really a villain, or the only disciple who truly understood Jesus' plan? This answer changes how we see everything.
In 1945, a farmer digging for fertilizer in the Egyptian desert cracked open a clay jar, finding something that would shake the foundations of Christianity. Inside was a leather-bound book that had been buried for over 1,600 years. And when scholars finally translated it, they discovered 114 sayings attributed to Jesus Christ, sayings that never made it into the Bible. Some of these sayings sound familiar. Others are so strange, so mystical, they read like riddles from another religion entirely. This is the Gospel of Thomas, and the reason you've probably never heard of it: the early church fought to destroy every copy. Today we're going to explore what's actually in this text and why it was buried, and what it reveals about a version of Jesus' teachings that the world almost lost forever. Now, before we fully dive in, let's get one thing straight. This isn't some Da Vinci Code conspiracy theory. The Gospel of Thomas is real. It's studied by scholars at Harvard, Princeton, and Oxford, and many historians believe that some of these sayings might actually be older than what's in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Here's what makes it different. There's no story, no birth of Jesus, miracles, no crucifixion, no resurrection. It's just sayings, one after another, 114 of them. And it opens with this: "These are the secret sayings that the living Jesus spoke, and Didymus Judas Thomas recorded. And he said, whoever discovers the meanings of these sayings will not taste death." Right out the gate, it's telling you, this isn't about believing the right things. It's about understanding something hidden, something that, if you can grasp it, changes everything about how you experience being alive. So what are these secret sayings? Let's look at the ones that actually make you think. If your leaders say to you, "Look, the kingdom is in the sky," then the birds will get there first. If they say, "It's in the sea," then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside you and outside you. When you know yourselves, you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father. This is radical. Jesus isn't pointing to heaven as some place you go when you die. He's saying it's here, inside you, inside me, around you, right now. But there's a catch, and you have to know yourself to see it. This isn't self-help fluff. Thomas presents self-knowledge as an actual path to the divine, not ritual or belief, but knowing who you really are. here's where it gets strange. When you make the two into the one, when you make the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner, the upper like the lower, and you make the male and the female into a single one, then you will enter the kingdom. What does that even mean? Scholars have debated this for decades, but the core idea seems to be about dissolving the divisions we create between ourselves and others, between our inner lives and our outer actions, between categories we assume are opposites. Thomas's Jesus is teaching a kind of unity consciousness. The kingdom isn't a place, it's a state of being where fragmentation ends. And then there's this one, which might be the most psychologically profound. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. You could read it again, but this isn't about confession or sin, it's about expression, authenticity, the things you're holding back, your truth, your creativity, your true self. If you don't let him out, it'll turn inward, they'll consume you. 2,000 years before modern psychology, this text is saying suppression is self-destructive. And finally, there's this. I am the light that is over all things. I am all. From me all has come forth, and to me all has reached. Split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift up a stone, and you will find me there. This one sounds almost Buddhist or Hindu, but Jesus isn't presenting himself as separate from creation. He's in it, everywhere. In our woods, under our stones. The divine isn't locked in the temple or a book, it's in everything you touch. So why did the church bury this? By the 4th century, Christianity was becoming the official religion of the Roman Empire. And empires need structure, hierarchy, clear rules about who has authority and who doesn't. The Gospel of Thomas had a problem. It didn't need priests. If the kingdom is already inside you, if you can find Jesus by splitting wood, why would you need a church to mediate your access to God? Bishop Athanasius of Alexandria ordered texts like the Gospel of Thomas to be destroyed, burnt. The version we have to this day only survived because monks in Egypt hid it in that clay jar to protect it from the flames. For 1600 years it sat in the desert, waiting to be opened. And here's what I want you to take from this. Whether you're a Christian, spiritual, agnostic or atheist, the Gospel of Thomas asks a question that doesn't require any belief to matter. What would change if you stopped looking outside yourself for meaning? What if the thing you're searching for isn't in the next book, the next achievement, the next relationship, but it has been with you the whole time, inside yourself, waiting for you to look inward and actually look? The early church decided that these ideas were dangerous. Maybe they were right. Because the person who realizes they don't need permission to access the sacred, the divine, that's not someone you can easily control. Split a piece of wood, lift up a stone, see what you find. The Bible has a massive secret. Every gospel skips the most important part of the story, the actual moment that Jesus came back to life. It's a total blackout. 1 minute he's in the tomb, the next he's gone. Until we found this. It's a forbidden gospel buried in a monk's coffin for 1,000 years. It doesn't just describe the resurrection. It describes cosmic giants, a sky that literally rips open, and a weapon of execution that begins to talk. The church called it heresy. The Romans tried to suppress it. But today we're finally looking at the director's cut of the New Testament. And it's trippy. But before we even get to the talking cross, we have to look at how we even got this. It's 1886 and an archaeologist named Sylvain Grébau is digging in Akhmim, Egypt. He finds a grave, but not of a pharaoh, it's a Christian monk from the 8th century. And tucked into his arms, like his final treasure, is a small little book. The monk knew he was taking something dangerous to his grave. This wasn't the Bible, you know. It was a collection of lost texts, and the most explosive one was a fragment from the Gospel of Peter. For centuries, scholars already knew that this book existed because ancient bishops complained about it constantly, but no one had actually read it. The monk who died with it was basically a rebel, keeping a banned pirate copy of the most controversial story in the history of the Christian faith. Okay, so let's get into the text. In Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the resurrection happens off-screen. But in Peter, well, Peter gives us the first-hand account. It's Friday night, and the Roman soldiers are terrified. They've seen weird things happening all day, and then, at the crack of dawn, a voice screams from the heavens. The soldiers look up, and the sky literally peels itself back. Two men descend in a beam of light so bright that it blinds the guards. The stone at the tomb, the one that's supposed to take a dozen men to move, it rolls away like a marble. The soldiers wake up their centurion. They're shaking, and then they see it. 3 men walking out of the tomb. Not the one we would expect. 2 angels walk alongside the risen Jesus. They're massive. Their heads are touching the clouds. But Jesus? His head reaches far above the clouds. He's literally become a cosmic giant. But then there was a moment that made the early church say, we're absolutely not having this. As the 3 giants emerge from the tomb, a giant wooden cross starts floating out behind them. A voice then booms from the stratosphere. Have you preached to those who sleep? And the cross, the literal wooden cross which Jesus Christ had died on, responds. It says, yes. Now, if you're thinking, that sounds like a weird fever dream, you're not alone. The early church leaders looked at this and thought it sounded like docetism. That's a fancy way of saying that Jesus wasn't a real human, but a ghost or divine hologram. If Jesus is now a 100-foot tall giant with a talking cross sidekick, it becomes hard to relate to him as a real human being who suffered and died on said cross. But there's an even darker reason that this book was burned. This is where the Gospel of Peter gets political, and to be honest, a little bit scary. In the standard Gospels, Pontius Pilate is a guy who washes his hands of the execution, but in the Gospel of Peter, Pilate is basically a hero. He's innocent, he's a, quote, friend of the Lord. The book shifts all of the blame, 100% of it, onto the Jewish people and King Herod. It says that the Jews rejoiced as they killed him. This was the gospel of accountability. The author was clearly trying to make Christianity more appealing to the Romans by saying, hey look, we don't really hate the empire, we hate the people who live next door to Jesus. This us versus them dynamic fueled centuries of anti-Semitism. Some scholars think that the church didn't ban the book because it was too weird. They banned it because it was too dangerous for the political stability of the time. So, is the Gospel of Peter real? Did the Apostle Peter actually write it? Well, probably not. Most historians agree that this was written at least 100 years after Peter died. But here's the kicker. For the people living in the 2nd century, this was their Bible. In a small town called Rosses, the local Christians were reading this out loud every week. They absolutely loved the giants. They loved the talking cross. They thought that this was the truth. Until a bishop named Serapion visited. He heard the part about the talking cross and basically said, lads, pack it up, we're just going to burn the library. We only have this book today because one monk in Egypt decided to break the rules and take this secret to his grave? What other missing scenes from the Bible are still buried in the sand?
The first rider carries a bow with no arrows. The second is handed a blade, and suddenly peace drains from the earth like water through cracked stone. Third weighs grain on a scale, while a voice on high announces prices that make survival impossible. The fourth is unarmed. His name is Death. He does not need a weapon. For centuries, people have treated these figures like coded warnings about the final days of humanity. Paintings turned them into skeletal nightmares, and preachers turned them to countdown clocks. But what if the four horsemen were never meant to forecast the end? To understand the riders, you have to step back into the world that imagined them. The book of Revelation was written towards the end of the 1st century. Its author, John, says he's on the island of Patmos, most likely in exile. This is not someone writing from comfort. The Roman Empire dominated the Mediterranean world. It controlled trade routes, taxation, military force, and political leadership across vast regions. Loyalty to Rome wasn't just a civic duty, it often had religious overtones. Emperors were honoured publicly. Participation in imperial rituals reinforced unity and allegiance to the empire. For early Christians, this created a lot of tension. Their loyalty to Christ didn't exactly blend easily with emperor worship. Refusal to do this could mean exclusion for them, socially, economically, and even legally. Revelation belongs to a style of writing called apocalyptic literature. That doesn't mean catastrophic, it means revelation and unveiling of what's really happening beneath the surface events. This style of writing uses symbols heavily. It draws from earlier Jewish texts, primarily Daniel and Zechariah. In Zechariah, for example, there are already coloured horses sent out across the earth. John isn't inventing from scratch, he's reworking familiar imagery for a new crisis. In chapter 6, a scroll sealed with 7 seals appears in heaven. Only the Lamb, representing Christ, is worthy to open it. As each seal is broken, something unfolds on the earth. The first 4 seals release riders. The first rider appears on a white horse. He carries a bow and he is given a crown. He rides out, conquering and to conquer. At first glance, the white horse creates confusion. In other parts of Revelation, white is associated with victory or righteousness. Some early interpreters even thought this rider symbolized Christ. But the context complicates that reading. The riders that follow bring violence, scarcity, and death. It would be unusual for the sequence to begin with something purely positive. Many scholars understand this first rider as representing conquest and organised expanding power. The bow is an interesting detail though. Rome was known for its legions and swords, but its eastern rivals, particularly the Parthians, were famous for mounted archery. The image may reflect both Roman expansion and the constant anxiety they had about external threats. The text also says the rider was given a crown. Given. The authority is permitted, it's allowed. This isn't chaotic rebellion, it's structured power operating within its limits. In the Roman world, conquest reshaped societies, territories were absolved, local economies were redirected, political systems replaced. Even when stability followed, it came at a cost. The first horseman represents that momentum, expansion that unsettles everything it touches, and once that process begins, it rarely remains contained. When the second seal is opened, another horse appears. This one is red. The rider is given a large sword, but the most important detail isn't this weapon, it's the description of his role. he is allowed to take peace from the earth. The text doesn't describe a specific battle, it describes the removal of peace as a concept itself. Once that restraint is gone, violence then spreads. People begin to turn on one another. In the Roman world, this would have felt familiar. The empire experienced internal conflict, regional uprisings, and power struggles on the regular. Judea had already seen a revolt and brutal suppression. Civil wars had reshaped Rome more than once. Expansion often creates instability because when a power centralizes itself, resistance begins to grow, and resistance then meets force, and of course, conflict intensifies. The second horseman represents that breakdown, the moment when tension shifts into open violence. It's not about a huge international war, it's about social fracture and the unraveling of order. The third seal reveals a black horse, its rider holding a pair of scales. Then a voice announces prices. A quart of wheat for a day's wages, 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages. In the ancient world, a day's wages was what a labourer needed to survive. These prices suggest that basic food has become barely affordable. People work all day and all night and struggle to feed themselves. Then comes a surprising detail. Do not harm the oil and the wine. Staple goods become scarce and expensive, yet luxury items remain untouched. This contrast reflects economic imbalance. In times of instability, the poorest feel it first and most severely. The wealthy often retain access to resources longer than everyone else. Roman taxation could be heavy, especially in provinces. Agricultural disruptions, tribute demands, and trade imbalances could push communities towards hardship. The third horseman highlights economic fragility, how quickly systems can appear to be stable, but then they begin to strain. It's not about famine in a sense, it's more in the sense of crop failure, like it's more access, about affordability, about survival becoming uncertain. When the fourth seal is opened, the tone shifts once more. A pale horse appears. The original Greek word suggesting a sickly greenish colour, a shade associated with illness or lifeless body. This rider is named directly Death, and Hades is following close behind. He is given authority over a quarter of the earth. Not a total destruction, but significant devastation. The text lists the causes: death by the sword, famine, plague, and wild beasts. These categories aren't chosen at random, but echo warnings found in earlier Hebrew scriptures. They're consequences that follow societal breakdown and covenant failure. What stands out, though, is how the writer gathers what the other 3 set in motion. The conquest destabilizes, then the conflict spreads through the abolition of peace, and then economic strain deepens. Death comes at the end and consolidates the outcome. The fourth horseman doesn't introduce a new crisis. He represents a cumulative effect of the first 3. Each rider is a chain reaction leading to the ultimate end. For centuries, readers have tried to identify these riders using specific historical events. Some have linked them to the fall of Rome, others to medieval invasions. During the Black Death, many believed they were watching the horsemen ride across Europe. In the 20th century world, wars, global pandemics revived the imagery again. Each generation finds parallels, and the pattern itself is revealing. Its apocalyptic literature uses symbols that are broad enough to speak beyond one singular moment. It doesn't operate like a detailed timeline. It captures forces that repeat. Every century, empire expands, violence escalates, economy strain, lives are lost. But these dynamics are not limited to that century. They'll happen again, and they'll continue to happen. The horsemen may not be forecasting a single future event. They may be exposing the reoccurring realities within human history. And that's why the imagery always feels current whenever global systems come under stress. All of this being said, it is important to remember that the horsemen are not the final scene of Revelation. The book moves beyond judgment towards restoration. It closes with an image of renewal, a world set right. The broader context does matter. The riders expose cycles of destruction, but they don't define the entire story. So when people ask whether 4 horsemen are riding now or whether they belong to an ancient past, the more thoughtful response might be this: they're current. They describe patterns that surface repeatedly in human history: the conquest, the violence, the scarcity, and the loss. The question Revelation leaves us with isn't about identifying a date. It's about recognizing the systems that continue to set these forces in motion. Because if history shows anything clearly, it's that the riders do not need myth to become visible. They emerge whenever a power expands without restraint, whenever peace begins to fracture, whenever survival becomes uneven. And that recognition may be the point of the vision. Not a fear of the future, but an awareness of the present, because the horses will continue to ride.
The most famous man in the history of the world has an 18-year hole in his resume. Between the age of 12 and the age of 30, the Bible goes completely silent on Jesus Christ. It's a total blackout. He's there as a kid in the temple, and then he's a 30-year-old miracle worker. But where was he? What was he doing? And why did the early church work so hard to keep his travel diary out of the New Testament? Today, we're going to look at 3 theories that the mainstream history books won't even touch. From hidden monasteries in the Himalayas to the secret druid circles of Britain, we are uncovering the lost years of Jesus of Nazareth. And the truth, it just might be more radical than anything you ever learned in school. In 1887, a Russian doctor named Nicholas Notovich was travelling through the freezing mountains of Ladakh, India. He ended up at a remote Buddhist monastery called Hemis. Whilst recovering from a broken leg he had received on his journey, the monks showed him something that shouldn't have existed. Many ancient scrolls describing a man named Isa. The scrolls claimed that at age 14, a young Hebrew boy arrived in India with a merchant caravan. He spent 6 years in the holy cities of Jagannath and Benares. He studied the Vedas, he learned Hindu teachings, healings, but then he did something very dangerous. He started to preach against the caste system. He told all the lower classes that they were equal to the priests. He was basically a 20-year-old revolutionary. And according to the monks, Isa had to flee for his life, crossing the Himalayas into Nepal, before finally heading back to Judea. Now, skeptics called Notovich a liar, but here's the kicker. Years later, other travellers went to that same monastery and they claimed that they saw the exact same scrolls. If Jesus did spend his early 20s in the East, it explains everything. It explains why his teachings on peace and non-attachment sounds so much like Buddhism. He wasn't just a carpenter, he was a bridge between the two worlds. But wait, what if he went west instead? Well, there's an ancient British legend that says that Jesus travelled to Cornwall and Glastonbury with his uncle, Joseph of Arimathea. At the time, Joseph was a wealthy tin merchant. He had ships, he had the money. But why would Jesus go to England? Well, to study with the Druids. In the ancient world, the Druids weren't just guys in robes, they were elite philosophers of the West. They believed in the immortality of the soul. They studied the stars. There's a famous poem by William Blake that asks, "And did those feet in ancient times walk upon England's mountains green?" Local legends in Glastonbury claim Jesus actually built a small mud and wattle church there with his own hands. If this is true, it changes the last years from a spiritual retreat into a global scouting mission. We're halfway through the 3 theories and it's about to get even weirder. If you're enjoying this deep dive so far, please hit that subscribe button. Now, back to the desert. The most likely theory, and the one that the church is most afraid of, is that Jesus never left the desert. In 1947, a shepherd boy found the Dead Sea Scrolls in a cave at Qumran. These scrolls belonged to the Essenes, a radical apocalyptic Jewish cult that lived in total isolation from the world. The Essenes practiced ritual baptism, they shared all their property, and they believed a teacher of righteousness was coming to save the world. Does this sound familiar? Many scholars believe Jesus spent his last years as an Essene monk. It explains why he disappeared into the wilderness after his baptism. He was going back to the people who trained him. But here's the problem. If Jesus was trained by a cult, it means that his own message wasn't 100% original. It means that he was part of a greater movement, a human movement. And for the church that wants Jesus to be a one-of-a-kind divine miracle, the idea that he was a student first is a major threat to the brand. So why does the Bible delete 18 years of his life? If Jesus was traveling the world, learning from Hindus, Druids, and Essene radicals, it makes him look like a seeker, a human, a man who had to learn his craft. The early church leaders in the 4th century wanted a god, not a traveller. They wanted a Jesus who was born perfect, not a Jesus who had to go off on a 5,000-mile hike to find his own voice. By deleting these lost years, they deleted his humanity. They turned a global revolutionary into a local miracle worker. Whether he was in India, Britain, Qumran, or stayed in Nazareth the whole time, we may never know where Jesus spent his last years. We might never find his travel diary, but the footsteps he left behind in legend tell of a story of a man who was far more complex than the version we see today in the pews.
What have I told you? The most famous demon in the world used to be Superman. Most people today hear the name Baal and they think of evil incarnate, a villain. They think of the Lord of the Flies, a spider-legged nightmare lurking in the basements of hell. But 3,500 years ago, Baal was the hero. He was the cloud rider. If you were a farmer in the ancient world and you heard thunder, you didn't hide in fear. You cheered. Because the thunder meant Baal was coming to save you from starvation. So how did we get from that, a golden god of life, to a 3-headed monster in medieval grimoire? This isn't just a story about religion. It's a story about the most successful character assassination in human history. It's a 3,000-year-long game of telephone, where the losers of a war were turned into the monsters of our nightmares. Today we're digging up the forbidden tablets of a lost civilization to uncover the truth about the Storm King. To find the real Baal, we have to go to the year 1200 BC, to a city called Ugarit. For thousands of years, Baal was just a villain in the Bible, but in 1929, a French archaeologist found a library of clay tablets that changed everything. These tablets tell the story of the Baal cycle, an epic that makes the Iliad look like a bedtime story. In this world, Baal Hadad isn't evil, he's the prince of the earth. But he has a problem, the god of the sea. Yam has gone rogue. He's demanding that the other gods hand over Baal as a slave.
Does Baal surrender? No. He gets two magical clubs named Driver and Chaser, and he beats the sea back into submission. He brings order to chaos. He is the warrior who ensures the cycles of nature don't break. To the people of the Levant, Baal was the protector. He was the one who died every winter and fought his way out of the underworld every spring, just to make sure the crops grew. He was the heartbeat of the ancient world. So, if Baal was the hero, why did he become the great enemy? Enter the Israelites. As the tribes of Israel were forming their identity, they had a major rival, the Canaanites. And the battle wasn't just over land, it was over weather. Both Yahweh and Baal claimed to be the master of the rains. This was a high-stakes marketing war. The biblical prophets knew that if people kept worshipping Baal, the new nation of Israel would fall apart. This led to the ultimate God-off. The prophet Elijah challenged 450 priests of Baal to a duel on Mount Carmel. The challenge? Whichever god sends fire from the sky wins. The Bible says the priests of Baal shouted until they were hoarse, but nothing happened. When Elijah prayed, fire blasted from heaven. This wasn't just a religious story, it was a political knockout. It was the moment Baal was officially branded a false god. But the real demonization was just only beginning. This is where the story gets petty, and I mean ancient world levels of petty. Baal's royal title was Baal Zebul, which means Lord of the High House or the Prince. It was a name of immense respect. The biblical writers pulled a classic move. They changed only one letter. They started calling him Baal Zebub. In Hebrew, Zebub means fly. Imagine taking a king named Prince of the Palace and calling him Lord of the Maggots. It was a joke that stuck for 2,000 years. And by the time we get to the New Testament, the joke had long stopped being funny. It had started becoming terrifying. In the Gospels, when the Pharisees see Jesus casting out demons, they don't say he's fake. They say his power comes from Beelzebub, the prince of demons. Baal was no longer a rival god. He had been demoted to Satan's right-hand man. He went from the god of the rain to the god of the unclean, the ruler of everything that rots, decays, and crawls. The final transformation happened in the Middle Ages. Occultists and demonologists began writing grimoires, handbooks on how to summon the spirits of hell. They took the name Baal and gave him nightmare makeover. Look at this thing. It has 3 heads, a human, a toad, and a cat, mounted on the legs of a giant spider. It's a far cry from the golden armoured warrior on the mountaintop. This is what happens when culture is forgotten. Baal didn't change, the story about him did. He became a container for everything humans were afraid of. The dark, the strange, the other. He was once the king of the heavens, and now he was a freak in a book of spells. Think the fear of Baal died in the Middle Ages? Think again. In the age of the smartphone, the storm god has undergone a further digital reincarnation as the face of Satanic Panic 2.0. Conspiracy theorists have rebranded Baal as a secret deity of the global elite. They point to massive public spectacles from the Olympics to modern art, claiming they are rituals in plain sight, dedicated to this ancient entity. The ultimate flashpoint? The Arch of Baal. In 2016, a 3D printed replica of the Arch of Palmyra was erected in London and New York. To historians and archaeologists, it was cultural preservation, but to the internet, it was a portal, a literal beckoning to invite a blood-hungry intelligence into the modern world. The irony is grim. this modern terror isn't based on the actual history of Ugarit, but on the propaganda campaign started 3,000 years ago. The information age has simply given new life to Iron Age paranoia. We aren't just fighting over the future, we're still fighting the same war that began on Mount Carmel. The story of Baal is the ultimate case study in the power of narrative. It proves that you do not need to destroy a god to defeat them. You simply need to change the way their name is spoken. For 3 millennia, Baal has been whatever the dominant power needed him to be. To the Canaanites, he was the essential king of life. To the Israelites, he was a dangerous rival. To the medieval occultists, he was a grotesque king of the pit. And to the modern theorists, he was a shadow lurking in the machinery of global power. We often think of history as a linear progression from myth to truth. But the evolution of Baal suggests something far more complex. It shows us that our oldest archetypes never truly disappear. They merely wait in the wings of the human psyche, ready to be rebranded, summoned whenever we need to face our fears. Baal did not fall from heaven, nor did he emerge from hell. He was sculpted by the hands of those who won the wars of the past. June 1764, a teenage girl is found in a field outside her village in southern France. Her throat has been torn open, her body partially eaten, her head nearly severed. This is not a battlefield. It's a farming province called Gévaudan. Over the next 3 years, something will systematically hunt the people there with terrifying consistency. Children, shepherds, women walking alone. More than 100 attacks, dozens killed. The King of France will send professional wolf hunters, then soldiers, then his personal gun bearer, and still it doesn't stop. This is the story of the beast of Gévaudan, and the strangest part, we still don't know what it was. Gévaudan was a remote province in south-central France. Today it's part of Lozère, but in the 1760s it was isolated, mountainous and poor. Forests pressed up against small villages, mist settled in valleys, farms were miles apart. Life was difficult, and wolves were common. People in Gévaudan were not naive about predators. Wolves attacked livestock regularly. Occasionally, during harsh winters, they even attacked people. But what began in 1764 didn't behave like normal wolf attacks. It targeted humans directly. It ignored cattle standing nearby. It returned to the same region repeatedly. And when it killed, it focused on the head and neck. This detail shows up again and again in records. The throat, always the throat. The earliest known attack happened in June 1764. A young woman tending cattle was knocked to the ground. She survived because her herd fought the animal off. But weeks later, a 14-year-old girl named Jeanne Bollet was killed. Parish records didn't say wolf attack. They said, killed by the ferocious beast, singular. Through summer and autumn, the attacks multiplied. Bodies were found dragged across fields, some partially eaten, some decapitated. Witnesses began describing the animal. Large, reddish or tawny fur, a dark stripe along its back, a long tail with a tuft at the end, an elongated snout, broad chest. It looked like a wolf, but there was something a little bit off. And this is where it stops being just a wildlife story. Because imagine living there. Every tree line becoming suspicious. Every walk between villages becomes a risk. Something is out there and no one can stop it. If you're into real historical mysteries like this, the ones that sit right on the edge between documented fact and folklore, this is what this channel explores, so subscribe if you want more stories like this. Now back to Gévaudan, because this is where it escalates. By late 1764, panic had taken over the province. Parents refused to let children travel alone. Villagers moved in armed groups. Church sermons directly mentioned the beast. And then the story spread, from village to town from town to regional officials, eventually reaching Paris. And once it had reached Paris, it reached the king, King Louis XV. Now, this wasn't just a rural tragedy, it was a royal embarrassment. How could the most powerful monarchy in Europe allow something, wolf or otherwise, to terrorize its citizens for months? The king had to respond, and he did, by sending professional wolf hunters, Jean-Charles Deneville and his son. Experienced men, experts, they had killed thousands of wolves in Normandy. They organised massive hunts with hundreds of men combing forests in coordinated lines. Wolves were slaughtered in large numbers, but the attacks continued. Same pattern, same brutality, which forced a disturbing question. Were they hunting the wrong animal? In 1765, the king replaced the Denevilles with Francois Antoine, his personal arquebus bearer. An elite marksman, a man sent when the crown demanded results. Antoine arrived with soldiers and authority. In September 1765, he shot and killed an enormous wolf near the Abbey of Chazes. Contemporary accounts describe it as an unusually large, heavy, impressive beast. It was mounted, preserved, and sent to Versailles. Officially, this was the beast. Paris celebrated as the problem was solved. Except it wasn't, because by December the killings began again. Same region, same targeting of women and children, same throat wounds. Now the situation was worse, because the crown had declared victory. This is where history becomes unstable. Some historians argue it was simply a series of wolf attacks, exaggerated over time by fear and media. France in the 18th century did experience wolf aggression during famine years, but there are many inconsistencies. Wolves typically avoid large groups of people. This creature sometimes attacked in front of witnesses. It appeared unusually bold. It returned repeatedly to populated areas. Then there are the physical descriptions. The reddish coat, the stripe along its back, the elongated skull, the tufted tail. Some suggest a wolf-dog hybrid. Others propose something more exotic, a hyena. France had colonial trade networks. Exotic animals were imported into private collections. A striped hyena would match some of the witness accounts disturbingly well. Then there are darker rumours. Whispers of human accomplice, of someone training an animal, of murder disguised as predation. There is no solid proof of that, but when fear spreads, imagination follows. What do we know? Documented in regional archives is that between 1764 and 1767, more than 100 attacks occurred. Somewhere between 60 and 100 people died. The scale is not folklore, that's a record. In June 1767, after 3 years of terror, a local hunter named Jean Chastel joined a coordinated hunt on Monmouchet. Later, legend claims he used silver bullets blessed by a priest, but this detail appears decades later, likely an embellishment. But this part is consistent. Chastel shot a large canid, and after that day, the attacks stopped. The carcass was examined. Some described unusual proportions, large head, elongated body. Others say it was simply a big wolf. The body was reportedly preserved, but it deteriorated before reaching Paris. No specimen survived, no skeleton, no confirmed remains. The beast vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. The beast of Gévaudan sits in a rare category of history. It is documented. Official letters do exist. Royal orders were issued and parish death records remain. And yet the central question remains unanswered. Was it just one animal? Multiple wolves mistaken for one? A hybrid? An exotic predator? Or something more complicated? For 3 years,
In one quiet province of France, something hunted human beings with terrifying regularity. The most powerful monarchy in Europe struggled to stop it. And then one day it simply ended. Maybe it was just wolves, but if you had lived in Gévaudan in 1765, if you had walked past the tree lines at dusk, you wouldn't have called it just anything. You would have called it what the records call it, the beast. In 1848, a congressman named Abraham Lincoln stood at the edge of Niagara Falls. He didn't just write about the beautiful majesty of the water. He wrote about the extinct giants whose bones fill the mounds of America. This wasn't a metaphor. In the 19th century, finding 9, 10, even 12-foot skeletons in the American Midwest was as common as finding an arrowhead. The New York Times even published 40 stories on these discoveries. They described massive skulls, double rows of teeth, and a 6-fingered hands. But if you go to the Smithsonian today and ask to see those crates, they'll tell you they don't exist, that it was all yellow journalism or misidentified mammoths. But in 1947, a discovery in a cave halfway across the world proved that these giants weren't just a myth. They were a nightmare that almost wiped us out entirely. To understand why these bones are being hidden, you first have to understand what, not who, the Nephilim actually were. The word Nephilim itself comes from the Hebrew root nephal, meaning the fallen ones. Ancient texts like Genesis 6 and the Book of Enoch describe a group of watchers, angelic beings tasked with observing Earth. They broke their primeval laws. They didn't just observe, they intervened. They took human wives, and the resulting offspring were called the Nephilim. These weren't just tall people. Ancient Sumerian tablets and the Torah describes them as a biological anomaly. They were born with 6 fingers and 6 toes, double rows of teeth, and they were described as having an insatiable hunger and a violent nature that humanity simply couldn't defend against. In every culture's golden age, myths from Greek Titans to the Sumerian Anunnaki, you find the same story. A race of demigods who were the architects of the ancient world, but who eventually turned into its greatest predators. Admitting these skeletons exist isn't just an archaeological correction. It's an admission that our DNA may have been tampered with by something from above. Between 1850 and 1920, thousands of burial mounds were leveled across the United States. The reports were consistent. In 1897 in Grafton, West Virginia, a 9-foot skeleton was found in a stone vault. In 1911, Lovelock Cave, Nevada, miners found red-haired giants and sandals 15 inches long, a size 20 in modern terms. Then there's the double row anomaly, skulls found with 2 full sets of teeth, a genetic marker mentioned in ancient texts across 3 different continents. These weren't tall humans, they were something else. And the Smithsonian Institution was there for almost every major find. Records show their agents arriving at the sites, cataloguing the remains and shipping them back to DC for analysis. And that is where the trail goes cold. They call it Building 10, a black hole for history. The official story is that these bones were fragile and crumbled to dust. But why would the premier scientific body on Earth lose the most important archaeological evidence in human history? To answer that, we have to look at what was found in 1947.
While the Smithsonian was busy scrubbing the American record, a shepherd boy in Palestine threw a rock into a cave and heard pottery shatter. He had found the Dead Sea Scrolls, but buried among the scripture was a document so terrifying it was suppressed further for decades. The Book of Giants. This text doesn't describe the Nephilim as wise ancient aliens or gods. It describes them as a biological monster. It claims these hybrids had appetites the earth couldn't sustain. According to the scrolls, they consumed hundreds of thousands of pounds of meat daily. When the livestock ran out, they turned on the animals. When the animals ran out, they turned on humanity. The 1947 scrolls describe a world of total ecological collapse. We weren't the masters of the ancient world, we had become livestock. The Great Flood, mentioned in nearly every ancient culture, wasn't just a random act of God. According to these texts, it was a global system reset, a desperate measure to stop a predator that was literally eating the world alive. But we have to look at the rational wall, because for every giant skeleton, there's a giant skeptic with a shovel. And we have to be honest about the facts. First, the Lincoln quote. Skeptics will argue Lincoln was looking at mastodon bones. In 1848, farmers often found mammoth femurs, and because they lacked a full skeleton to compare them to, they assumed that they were giant people. Second, the Smithsonian cover-up. They aren't necessarily hiding giants to protect Darwinism. They're following NAGPRA. Since 1990, federal law has required museums to return Native American remains to their tribes for burial. If the Smithsonian lost the bones, it's often because they were returned and reburied away from public view. Third, the teeth. Double rows are often just the impacted wisdom teeth, or extreme wear from diet of stone ground grain, which makes the jawbone look like it has a second row of teeth. So, it's all just a big misunderstanding, right? Bad science, mammoth bones, case closed. Except for one detail the Smithsonian can't explain. In 1881, field reports from the Smithsonian's own Bureau of Ethnology, their agent, Peter Bunzel, reported finding a skeleton in an Ohio mound that was so large that the skull could fit over a man's head like a helmet. If it was a mammoth, Bunzel, a trained field agent, would have known the difference. The Smithsonian isn't hiding the bones because they're afraid of the Bible. They're hiding them because the 1947 scrolls were right. These beings weren't just big, they were genetic anomaly. And admitting they existed means admitting that humanity was once almost erased by something we couldn't fight.
They say the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist. But that's a modern luxury. The ancients knew better. The texts written in the dust of the Levant 2,000 years ago describe a man who mirrors exactly what a broken world is looking for. A builder of cities and negotiator of peace. A man who speaks in dark sentences and boasts of things that no one else would dare of. For 10 years, a pattern has been emerging. It's moved from the dark corners of the internet into the very halls of power. We aren't just talking about a politician anymore. We're talking about a 2,000-year-old checklist that seems to continuously tick itself off in the morning headlines. From the burning horizons of Iran to the glowing AI icons on his phone. The question isn't whether you like the man. The question is, do you recognize the pattern? To the secular mind, moving the embassy to Jerusalem is just a little bit of geopolitics, a campaign promise kept. But for those who study the end of days, it was the sound of a heavy bolt sliding on the door that's been locked since 70 AD. The prophecy is very clear. The man of sin must eventually seat himself in the third temple. But there's a problem. For 2 millennia, that temple hasn't existed. It's been a theological ghost, destroyed in 70 AD. Then comes a man who leans into the Cyrus archetype. King Cyrus, of course, was the Persian ruler who paved the way for the original temple to be built. Today, you can buy commemorative coins in Jerusalem that place a certain man's face right next to the face of King Cyrus. And it's not just the building, there's a ritual. In the last few years, we've seen the arrival of red heifers in Israel, the specific rare animals required to purify the ground before a temple can be built. The timeline is tightening, and he isn't just a ruler in the eyes of the Messianic. He's the enabler, the one bold enough to greenlight a project that the rest of the world knows would ignite a global holy war. And the book of Daniel speaks of a prince who will confirm a covenant with many for a period of 7 years. A peace deal that the world thinks will save it, but instead sets the stage for the end. Sound familiar? When the Abraham Accords were signed, the room was filled with smiles and talk of a new Middle East. But the watchers weren't smiling, they were counting. It was a deal made in a way no one thought possible, bypassing all of the old rules, focusing on the art of the deal over the doctrine. It's the hallmark of his archetype, a man who doesn't care for the gods of his fathers, but for the gods of fortresses and gold, a man who negotiates the impossible, while the world marvels at his genius. And now look to the east, Persia, what we call Iran. The scrolls speak of a Gog and Magog alliance, a collision of ancient powers that drags the world into the valley of decision. Look at the last few years. 2024 to 2026 has been a masterclass in brinkmanship. Direct strikes, missile swarms, the constant poking of an Iranian bear. Most leaders fear the fire of a Third World War. He seems to revel in it, thinking he's the only one who can walk through it without getting singed. To his followers, it's a strong man keeping the peace. But to theologians, it's the exact geopolitical alignment required for the world starting to unravel. And this is where the prophecy enters into the 21st century, the image of the beast. We've entered a surreal age where his supporters don't just vote for him anymore. They deify him, turn him into a god. Go online and you'll see it yourself. Thousands of AI-generated icons of the man as a Christ-like figure, draped in light, surrounded by angels, healing the sick. He's even posted them himself. It's a digital cult of personality that transcends politics. The prophecy says that the world will wonder after the man. It says people will take the mark of allegiance, a sign on their forehead or their hand. And when you see millions of people wearing his name on their hats, tied to the very identity, you have to ask, was the mark ever a microchip? Was it always a brand of the soul? A sign that you belong to a man before you belong to anything else? Finally, there is the detail that turned some skeptics even into believers. A fatal wound to the head that is healed. Think of the moments he should have been finished. The trials, the scandals, the impeachments, each one a death blow to literally any other political career. And then the literal attempt on his life. Blood on his face, a fist in the air. It was more than political survival, it was liturgical. The crowd didn't see a man who got lucky. They saw a miracle, a man saved by God who could not be killed. And that's a trap. Prophecy says the world marvels because they think he is untouchable. Who is like unto the beast, they ask. Who can make war with him? So, is Donald Trump the one? Or is he the ultimate shadow we've cast on our own wall? Maybe he's not the Antichrist. Maybe he's just the perfect reflection of a world that wants the king more than it wants truth. A world that's so tired of lies that it's willing to embrace a new one, as long as it's gilded in gold. But whether he's the man from the scrolls or a man who just knows how to act the part, the pattern is complete, and names like that, they don't stay buried for long. If you've been watching Patterns and you're interested in the idea of the Antichrist, we have done a video on this channel about the criteria, and we've examined 3 historical figures who might or might not fit the criteria. And you can find that up in the top left corner, I believe. Leave a comment below. Let me know if you think Donald J. Trump may or may not be the Antichrist we read about. And subscribe if you're brave enough to continue to look at patterns that they keep trying to hide. Until the next time, thank you very much for watching.